hard for me to get going anyway.
Well, did Dan Stewart call you?
I'm not going to report.
Well, I told him to.
Okay, yes.
So Dan,
He was pretty close to look about it though.
Things take a while, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is what you would want. Yep, right. We can deal with it or whatever.
Okay. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. Start with invocation. Chaplain Herman Gant. Is he here? Yeah.
Let us pray. God of heaven, we come before you today, giving honor and glory to you this day. We're asking, oh Lord, that your blessing be upon this meeting. We ask you today, Lord, bless us with understanding, bless us with wisdom. And most of all, Lord, we ask that your will be done. And we'll give you the glory this day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Continue standing and have a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have the finance government, do we have Catherine Shields? If not, call on Councilwoman Heather Hall.
Good morning, Board of Police Commissioners, Mayor Lucas, Chief Smith, everyone, thank you for letting me be here today. It's been a few months since I've joined you. We are finally through the budget cycle, but we are now doing a few other interesting things here in Kansas City with the American Recovery Plan. And this last weekend, or Friday, I guess, the mayor and council, we received a resolution draft from our city manager, seeing how we would allocate the first tranche of funds that we're going to be getting from the American Recovery Plan. So what many of my colleagues and I did was we added into that spending allocation request $9.2 million to be allocated to the Kansas City Police Department for the things that will align them so that they will be equal with what the Kansas City Fire Department's getting and commensurate to their salary situation. So, and also for an academy class, which we find to be very important. This is not a done deal. This is our request. There are several of my colleagues who are excited about this, but it needs 7 votes. So I'm not making any promises. I'm telling you what we have requested because we believe it's the right thing to do. We believe we need another academy class so that the Kansas City Police Department can continue to deepen its bench to protect the people of the city. So that's what we're requesting. I'm sure the mayor has way more information than I do on what I'm sharing today, but that's the update from where the finance department is, the finance committee, as well as what that looks like from our direction from our new city manager, Brian Platt. So we'll be discussing that. I don't think it's going to be voted on specifically this week. I think we've got some discussions that need to take place. As with anything, it's a jockeying of priorities, and there's 13 of us who think we have a lot of priorities, and so that's kind of where we are.
Thank you. Well, actually, it won't deepen the bench, but it'll replace some of the people that we've lost.
Yes, sir, you're correct. You're right. I think it's been, 14 retirements we've already had, so you're correct. Thank you.
Heather, what is the, and maybe the mayor can speak to this, what is the public explanation for why we have the divide between our condition on salaries and that of the fire department? So why is there the need to make up this spread with these allocated funds from the federal government?
Well, we believe that the police department had taken cuts in the previous last year when we did the 4.5% cuts, and then also in this current year, that was where they had to make their cuts. The fire department was in a, I don't know if it's a whatever the decision was. What happened was previous year, they put out a request for a vote for an increase for their sales tax, for the public safety, fire safety tax, and they received that. And that's about $16 million, I believe, this year that they'll gain. So because of that, they were, I don't want to say made whole, but they definitely have more funds, so they're able to do that. The police did not request more, and I don't mean the police department, but just in general, there was not a request for a public safety sales tax, or they could have gone in on that potentially with them. That did not happen. Therefore, there was not an extra tax for public safety voted on that would have given a cushion. Although you couldn't see into the future 2 years ago to think, well, we better ask for that so that we can, in case the pandemic happens. And so that was, I believe, just, something you all wouldn't have thought to do, but it was something that probably should have been done in hindsight. But it's, again, easy to look at it from this point.
And does the fire tax fill the breach between what the police department suffered in terms of reductions by the city and what the fire department suffered by reductions from the city?
I might let the mayor help answer that question. I would say not exactly, because some of those allocations of that 16 million aren't allowable for certain things. And so it doesn't just immediately fix the hole on salaries, but our budget for the fire department did do that. And we also then allowed for a $4.4 million allocation in our finance committee last week to fix their overtime. And we did not do that for the $2.1 million of overtime for the police department, which I believe our colleagues should do, but that wasn't voted on by our committee.
I
Sorry,
would say
Mr.
that
Mayor.
Councilman Hall's described the situation fairly well. The total increase in fire department spending mixes, perhaps unfortunately for us, some of the fire sales tax approved costs. So they ran the sales tax on improving stations, bathroom improvements, those sorts of things. So that is some of their budget increase. Their additional, however, they were held fairly harmless, Councilman Hall, I believe, in terms of salary increases this year, benefits, employment numbers as well. And so there is, I think, a fairly clear material difference between the fire department and likely every other city department and the police department in terms of how the treatment has been.
And why is that?
A number of different reasons. One could say it just boils down to their approach to the budgeting process. As you may recall, I think, and Councilman Hall recalls well, every department provided budget reductions except for the Kansas City, Missouri Fire Department. And I think we had tried to hold them to a set of reduction areas. They were able to fill gaps with the fire sales tax. So in essence, there is, I think, a bit of a contention, both from the management side and certainly the union side with fire, that was, well, we raised, in essence, our extra money to fill any types of budget gaps. And so therefore they were contending they should be held harmless in connection with it. But it's fair to say there's a material difference in how the fire department was treated versus other, both city departments and the Kansas City Police Department.
And is there merit to the position that the disparate treatment between the agencies is a consequence of the level of influence that the fire union has over the city versus that of the police department?
I would argue that's probably, I will say this, I think the first concern, if you see it as a concern, comes from management, actually, in the sense that one would wish that their leadership would have proposed the same string of cuts that the Director of Public Works, Kansas City Police Chief, a number of others had actually laid out and proposed. That did not occur from us. And so I think that there is probably an administrative concern even before you might get to the union side of things. However, I will not dispute that they are a strong and active group.
Enough said.
Commissioner Garrett, I would just also, to the mayor's point, I believe that, every firefighter that I talk to and every police officer I talk to don't want to see that disparity, because they look at each other as a team and they don't want there to be divisions between the departments because they work so well together. And it's really important that they have that parity so that they're in this together, and they always are, right? That's what they do. The fire and the police go in and do things together in the EMS, and we want to make sure that we don't make things in an unequal playing field for them.
Well, that's reassuring to hear, but it doesn't make it so.
No, but it does make it so for the people who have at least communicated to me about it. And that's what my hope, Commissioner, is that we will get enough votes with the ARP that would allow us to align that way. Because through the 9.2, what that equals is 2.8 million for an academy class of 50 to start in June of 2021. It accounts for 2.8 million to pay step increase and a mid-year increase for those at the top. And it allows 3.6 million to restore appropriations utilized to offset rising contractual obligations. So it's not like we're asking for, the police department's not asking for a crazy amount of money to do something wild. This is just the basics. And my hope, and many of my colleagues' hope, is that our full council will vote to support this in the ARP resolution.
Well, and Heather, I continue to appreciate your level of advocacy at the city on our behalf. And I realize the relationship between us and the city is what it is. And I also recognize that we are in the disfavored profession of policing and keeping the city safe as well, as do our partners at fire. I certainly admire and respect the role they play as well. But, the situation being as twisted up and perverted as it is with regard to policing, and there being those who are sympathetic to the maddening and nonsensical notion of defunding and demoralizing our police force, I fear that creeps in without accountability. So that's why I speak to it here, and I will continue to do so.
I appreciate that, and I would ask you to continue to speak to it, because what we find in Kansas City is that we get the brunt of the blame of other police departments that across the country's problems. We are not other people's police departments. We are the Kansas City Police Department here in Kansas City, and we as a city need to be able to compartmentalize and say, I'm not going to blame you for other people's problems. And that's what seems to happen, and that's not okay. So I'm hopeful that our colleagues will see this and will see that we need to make sure that we are fair across the board with all of our departments.
I would just encourage you as a person there at the scene to call it for what it is and to ensure that there's accountability and not camouflage.
Thank you, sir. I do have one more thing I'd like to bring up to the body, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
So something exciting that's been going on is that behind the scenes, the chief of police and the human resources department has figured out a way to make sure that there's parity for all their employees. The police department has 2,000 employees, as you know, and many of those employees, a high percentage of them, have children living in their home that have special needs of some sort. And what we have done at the city of Kansas City, and what you all have done through the police department, is under the chief's direction has offered an opportunity for a funding vehicle called the Missouri ABLE program for you all to allow your employees who have children with special needs to have a funding vehicle like the College 529 Savings Plan to give them the opportunity to save for their children's future. That is a benefit that won't make them lose their Medicaid or Social Security benefits. And I think that it's extraordinary to see that the chief and the Human Resources Department cares so much about all their employees, not just some of their employees, but to offer them an opportunity to protect their children when they're out protecting the people of Kansas City so well. They need one less thing to worry about. And this is something that they have done. And it's something that does not cost the police department any money. You don't contribute to it like a 401k or something like that. You don't add money to it. So it doesn't cost the police department a dime. It just allows you a benefit to help your people who help everybody in Kansas City. So I just want to applaud the police chief and the Human Resources Department for seeing this need. They are putting it out on the employee benefit sites. They're letting them do it. You can do it whenever they want to. And this is just something that's important to do, and we should be doing it. And so I just wanted to say thank you to the chief for recognizing that all of his employees are important and their children. So thank you.
Councilwoman Hall?
Yes, sir.
If I may pursue one other area of inquiry, and I will say this in response to Commissioner Garrett's points, I have the chance to appoint the committees for City Council, and it was with some care that I put Councilwoman Hall in the position she is. I've known her for some years now. I know her to be a strong advocate, not just for this department, but other positions, and I think she is loud in every discussion in the Finance Committee and will continue to be so. Some of our theory in the budget process, and Councilwoman Hall and I, and this board actually have discussed it previously, related to the Kansas City International Airport and policing issues. And I know work continues there. I've been asked in these board meetings about where we are. I know, Chief, you may not have necessarily prepared for that for this meeting, but as I understand it, we have studied some other models in other cities so that conversations can begin anew with airlines to try to keep that process moving. If you could, and only go as far as is appropriate at this time, but can you give the board a brief update? Because I do think it's germane to the budgeting issue as well.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. We have been in discussions. I met with the city manager last week. He and I talked about putting together how we're going to frame some of the financial considerations up at the airport and how we should document that. So we are in that process now of creating those documents and then have another presentation, I believe, back to aviation and the airlines.
And then the time frame for your next presentation, do you know, is that?
We haven't set it yet. I think the idea is we're going to get the documents, sit down with the city manager, again, have a discussion, and then call for the meeting.
Understood. Just wanted to make it clear, and I know Councilwoman Hall and I think Councilwoman Lohr had been supporters of that effort before. It continues to move. Just because it's not on the front page doesn't mean it's not happening. So I wanted to make sure folks knew we were still taking steps there that addresses at least one budget issue, which is the fact that the department for years now has been contributing, I think, important policing services at the airport without adequate compensation for that. And so I think that will be at least a positive going forward. So thank you, Chief, and thank you, Councilman Hall.
So I want to ask a question now.
Sure.
So when the police department had a chief at the airport, who paid for that?
I believe the current funding for all airport police operations comes out of aviation.
Okay.
So it comes out of the aviation budget. So the city ultimately is the payer, but I believe as we go through this exercise at the airport is what's designated as an enterprise fund, which has it a little bit different than the general fund monies that we talk about generally here with the police department. And so that the airport police operations then comes out of that enterprise fund.
Because it seems to me that if we are not if, since we're having budget problems, instead of taking on more, if there is a vehicle to pay for their own policing, it may be something that we need to get rid of and let them do it like they were doing it. But, I think it has to be up for discussion.
So I would say, Commissioner, the theory is a parallel one, but slightly different, which is that, and this is the view I've had. So the Kansas City Police Department provides services now and provides strong services. I think the question that has existed for some years is, can the department be adequately compensated for those services from this enterprise fund source? And for those watching at home, that means that those are paid for by user fees from those flying at the airport, not your everyday Kansas City, Missouri taxpayer. And the thought would be that recognizing that the department will probably always, fortunately or unfortunately, provide some services. The department, in my view, is better prepared for terrorist events, for mass shootings, those sorts of things they train for regularly, making sure that there's actually a relationship where the department gets paid up front rather than, as I would see it, and the chief is being kind, but I don't have to be, where I think, frankly, the police department has loaned probably millions of dollars of services to the airport for a number of years without actually getting paid back for it. What we're trying to do is say that if the department's going to be up there, then they need to be compensated really up front. So in the beginning of a budget year, that roughly, as I last read it, I may be off, that $4.5 million cost or so is something that is coming from the aviation department. At the beginning of the year, you can plan the officers you need and all of that, rather than a back end loss that is either just not getting paid or being covered by taxpayers generally, not the users of the airport.
I think that this is one of the things that I talked with the mayor with, and also Catherine Shields independently, and I had conversations about this because it was one of the areas that was, when we were talking about budget cuts and how we could manage those cuts while still performing services, one of the areas of efficiency and savings that we saw was by moving into the airport environment with the police department and using those funds. So those funds are not part of the general revenue fund. Those are a separate mechanism of funding. So if you took us, you could take us off that amount of money off the books on general revenue and replace it with the aviation funds, you know, dollar for dollar. It's about a $5 million nut. That saves us $5 million on our budget per general revenue and allows it to be supplemented with the use of the aviation resources. That, coupled with the fact that, with no disrespect at all to the current airport police that perform that service, but with the new airport environment that we're now moving into, that, you know, Kansas City Police Department just brought a level of resource to that environment that we thought was commensurate with the level of airport that we're now going to possess. And there was certainly going to be some melding together of those forces for a period of time. But that's one of the things that we have advocated for, is to move Kansas City PD into that. I think it is just plainly stated, we never got paid for it. So we performed those services and we never got paid for it. There's no maybe, well, could have, maybe it happened. It didn't happen. We didn't get paid for it. So we're trying to fix that and also create a level of policing environment at the new airport that's conducive to the operation.
Okay.
Thank you very much. If there's no more questions, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you for your report. Call on Pastor Darren Edwards to give us to let us know about some of the activity of getting to the heart of the matter. He's been working hard, so. Pastor Edwards?
Good morning. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. I want to begin my my brief conversation with these words. I'd rather stand in the middle and seek solutions than stand on the wall doing nothing, saying nothing, or screaming and shouting. I think it's time for our people. They expect more, they demand more, they want more. Over the past month, Getting to the Heart of the Matter has facilitated 5 out of 6 division meetings with CIOs, their stakeholders, their neighborhood associations, and really having some deep dive discussions on the issues that plague our city. I think we can all attest that from April of 2020 to April of 2021, our nation has been challenged. We've come against some headwinds that we just did not expect, from pandemic to systemic issues, to epidemic issues. But it takes all of us coming together, sitting at the table to reach solutions. I believe community leadership has 4 C's. The good community leadership doesn't compete, doesn't compare, doesn't complain, and doesn't care who gets the credit. I want to quote to you one of your colleagues who was a dear friend of mine, Bayless Tate, who said in 2012, "No city is greater than its neighborhoods. No neighborhoods are greater than the families that are there. No families are greater than their children. And if you want to live in a great city, you have to go and instill those things you feel strongly about into those sectors." That, to me, ladies and gentlemen, is what Getting to the Heart of the Matter is all about. Building bridges, finding solutions, stop the complaining, the competing and comparing, and start caring about who gets the credit. And so from those things, we've met, we continue to meet, we've engaged conversations. with the chief, with KCPD. I do want to read a collective statement that will go out to media immediately after it's read by the KCPD media unit. It is a collective statement from a meeting we had with Chief Rick Smith, along with the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 99, and with the leadership of Getting to the Heart of the Matter, namely Dr. Emmanuel Cleaver III, Pastor Ron Lindsay, and myself, Pastor Darren Lamont Edwards. So let me read the collective statement. Systemic racism can be intentional as much as unintentional. There are policies and procedures that unintentionally cause harm to people and groups, particularly Black and brown people. Getting to the Heart of the Matter leaders had a very honest and productive meeting with Police Chief Rick Smith and several board members from the Kansas City Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 99. During the meeting, much was discussed regarding historical data, current practices, and where we may go from here. While there is much work to do, it is our belief that the group is committed to have the difficult discussions and work to create standards that eliminate discrimination within the force, over-policing in minority communities, and transparent response to citizen complaints. I believe from that meeting, we are assembling together to really look at what does it take to change the culture of policing, not only in America, but certainly in Kansas City, because we all believe Kansas City can be a safe city in every zip code. And I do believe the chief would concur with this statement as we crafted this statement together. And so I'm willing to entertain any questions that you have as we continue to deal with the challenges of our city. But again, just know that you have a player who's ready to stand in the middle to bring about solutions instead of standing on the wall creating problems. Thank you.
I guess my question would be, what do you see as the next steps and getting
One
to
of the
that?
next steps, and thank you for that question. One of the next steps for getting to the heart of the matter is we would love to engage with the Board of Police Commissioners. We've met with the Fraternal Order of Police. We continue to meet with Kansas City PD. We continue to meet with community neighborhoods and stakeholders. We would love to have a meeting with the Board of Police Commissioners to get your take, your pulse, your feel on where our city needs to go. And as we all continue to work together to do so. So that's an open invitation to have a meeting.
Well, I'm available. We could set something up with me personally. I think that as far as the commissioners are concerned, I mean, this is sort of a meeting with the commissioners. But another question I might have is getting to the heart of the matter. How are you sustaining yourself, and how are you continuing to grow? And we certainly do appreciate your work. Certainly agree with everything that you said here. And how are you managing to continue to make progress?
Well, thank you for the question. Sustainability that Pastor Cleaver, Pastor Lindsay, and myself, we really don't see this as advocacy work as much as we see it as God's plan. We believe God has a plan for calling us to work with KCPD to build bridges for the community. Sustainability, we have some incredible churches and some incredible congregations who undergird us and support us as we continue to build bridges in our city. And so that's where the sustainability to this point has come from. But I do believe Bayless Tate is correct that sooner or later, you got to instill and invest in those approaches to reach the constituents that really matter.
Thank you. Any questions from the,
No, Don, I just add, well, first of all, Pastor Edwards, my continued appreciation for your enormous investment, into this issue. I've had a lot of conversations with the chief about his relationship with your group and with you. Suffice to say, he's very positive about that, finds that to be an incredibly constructive relationship, as do I. And that's been one of the hard messages to get out here. It's just been such an us versus them mentality that seems to have been very prevalent. And I think you bring a level of level-headedness, practicality, understanding, tone, temperature that is needed for these conversations to progress in a constructive way. I think in terms of conversation with the board, and this is something the chief and I have talked about, I will absolutely make myself available to meet with you. We, as a public body, we do have certain limitations when we meet collectively as a body. So I think that at the same time, so I see this as a meeting with the board as a body, Pastor Edwards, but I also recognize that real solutions don't happen when we're behind plexiglass and cameras and these types of situations. It's down in the trenches with our sleeves rolled up and the spit flying. That's when things really get done. So I just want you to know that I know I speak on behalf of all these commissioners, and certainly on behalf of myself and with Commissioner Wagner, I'd be pleased to meet with you and roll my sleeves up with yours and hear your perspective and see if we can make some progress that is constructive for this department, for the community. So continued thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you.
Can I add, with Pastor Edwards still on, I just wanted to mention, we had a really good discussion about many things when we were with them. But, one of the things I asked is they wanted, getting a heart of the matter, asked if we could look at some policies and just to make sure whether there's intentional or unintentional systematic racism in anything we put out to our members. And I said, absolutely. I said, most of our policies are public and posted on our website, and anybody can read them. And we would welcome any kind of sit down and anyone wants to talk about them or have a review or take a look at them. So I believe that's also a next step, correct, Pastor Edwards, is that we will get that going in some capacity and take a look at that. So I just wanted the board to know that, we didn't turn away from any discussion, and we appreciated the discussion back and forth and the honesty about the different perspectives. So again, I have to compliment Pastor Edwards on leading us through all this. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and Pastor Edwards, this is a question for you. You are my elder. You have been making change in these communities, in our community, longer than I have. And I think it is fair to say, I attended the Urban Summit on Friday. I've been going for years. Folks that are your friends and mine, NAACP, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, others, have disagreements in some ways with getting to the heart of the matters approach. You have discussed collaboration. What is the plan for that broader collaboration and different community voices to make sure that all are heard and are part of the discussion on the future of this department and the future of department community relations? What are the efforts ahead to make sure that all those voices come into this chat too? Because what I don't want my colleagues on the board to think, and they know otherwise, but I want them to hear the broad array of voices to make sure that everybody's making informed decisions with all that they must do.
And thank you for making that statement, Brother Mayor, and congratulations to you on a lot of different fronts.
Thank you.
I will say to you, the Black community is not monolithic. It has a varied of voices and many opinions, and they're all appreciated. Getting to the heart of the matter, when we have meetings with the chief and times to engage with our divisional meetings, invitations go out to well over 250 individuals to be a part of those meetings month after month. When we have meetings, there's not one time I haven't invited the groups that you named to be a part of conversation. They have, in their way, declined those invitations for their own reasons. But I will pivot to this discussion. We've got to come together because also we've got to deal with our own challenges in our Black community. And if we cannot rally together and come together for that, then we won't rally together and come together for this. And so I put the appeal out in a public space. Let's meet together about some of the issues in our own village as we also look to build out into our community and our city.
I will just say this, and thank you, Pastor, for that. Foundational, and you alluded to this issue, it's one I think about a lot. We all saw the violence in our city this last weekend. We see it every weekend. We see it every week. We see it Monday afternoons, right? I mean, it is something. To me, foundational is making sure that we build and enhance community trust long-term. It pains me when people say, yeah, I saw what happened at 19th and Vine, but I didn't trust calling the police, or I didn't want to talk to anybody, or any other number of things. And so to me, no matter who is part of all of this, we need to make sure that the conversation goes both ways in terms of building that stronger trust. I know often we will say, and I'm the mayor, so I talk to a lot of different people. And like you said, there are a lot of different voices, but there is a lot of work we have to do. And that work isn't just in the direction of Black communities speaking to the police and doing more. There is a lot more that where the police, the department, and others, I think, can speak to more community voices to make sure that trust is getting built up. And I hope that in these conversations, we make sure that is being done deeply as well. And so I'll make that the comment for now, but I look forward to seeing what that advocacy is and how we engage a lot of those different voices around, so we can just solve the things that need to be solved. We can address the issues that need to be addressed long term.
And Mayor, I will just quickly respond to that. I just believe if you can pull together the group, you can. Bishop Tolbert can pull together the group, he can. I can pull together the group, I can. Pastor Miles can pull together a group, he can. Sandy Wainwright can pull together the group that she can. The voices are at the table. And so that's an open commitment and challenge. Let's use our spheres of influence and pull the people that we know that we can, so that the broader discussion can be had. I'm ready.
I think the only thing I would add, again, just to carry this on maybe longer than we should, but with all due respect, there's politics and there's problem solving. And there are groups in this community, some of whom are shouting the loudest, that have no interest in actually solving problems. It's just perpetuating the moment. That's a fact. That's a fact. And that's not being on this side or the other side. That's just, if you're a problem solver and you have any experience at all solving problems, you can recognize that situation for what it is. And if you don't, you're never going to get anywhere. We can continue to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and try to placate everybody and try to give everybody something. But the fact of the matter is that there are some elements to this conversation that have no appetite, no interest, even if they had the capacity. So I appreciate, Pastor Edwards, what you're doing in trying to bring a pragmatic, realistic approach to this to move the conversation forward. So while I encourage you to speak as broadly and widely and create a tent that will envelop all who are genuinely interested in a real conversation, not a shouting match, not an us versus them in perpetuity, but an actual constructive dialogue where not only do the people on the blue side listen to those voices and unpack those concerns, but also those on that side listen and unpack the concerns on the blue side. The fact of the matter is that policing is a profession. And it is in large part one that must be experienced to understand. And we've had a lot of people involved in these conversations that know nothing about it. Nothing about it. Nothing about the life and the experience of men and women who strap it on every day to go out in harm's way at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning in these environments to try to bring peace and order and justice. They have no understanding and they have no interest in understanding. And they will continue to remain entrenched in their perceived positions and to create and continue this dialogue of hate and discord in perpetuity. That will get us nowhere, and it never will. We can continue to talk about it. We continue to preach about it. We can continue to do whatever we want to do for however long we want to do it, and we'll get nowhere. We'll find ourselves right back here again. So all that enough. Pastor Edwards, I appreciate what you're doing here, and I commit to you my involvement to the extent that is meaningful and constructive. So thank you.
I'll just be, well, Bishop.
Let me say, Pastor Edwards, of course, thank you for the work that you're doing, and Pastor Lindsay, Pastor Cleaver. I've met with you all. I think that we have to get to a place where, after 33 years of pastoring a big group of people, I understand that all opinions matter. And in order to get to some places where we've been able to educate over 10,000 children in a charter school, everybody didn't agree that we should start one or build an educational wing, but because we got everybody to the table, as you said, Pastor Edwards, and we let everybody's opinion matter, we were finally able to come to a compromise. So while I also believe that policing is a profession, I grew up in Kansas City where I used to walk to a grocery store called Safeway from my house. I knew many policemen who did private duty policing. Those policemen were my friends. And I was a kid, but they had the kind of attitude that showed me they were there to protect and to serve my community. So we've got to find that place where when I am in a profession, I approach that professionally. And so I'm sure this is a topic we could stay on all day. It won't get us anywhere, but we are moving toward something that I think will be progressive as long as we remember that all opinions do matter.
I would never, and the bishop says it well, I will just add this, and I will start with this memory I have, some of which similar to the bishop's, some are different. But I remember when I was first running for council, and there was a community leader who said, "Lucas, you're not," and then an expletive that relates to cow dung. And I left that meeting angry and hot and saying, how dare she, right, say that sort of thing? I've done this, that, and the other. But then I actually thought about it. Where does that comment come from? Where does that pain come from? What experiences lead someone to say, even when they're in front of a person who can be making a difference, that they say, I don't respect what you do or what you're doing? And that's probably because for generations of her life and so many others, she had felt she had no voice, her community had no voice, and that nothing would ever change. And so as someone who, I guess the social media phrase is gets dragged, as someone who gets dragged by some groups as much as anybody else, criticized, for those who don't know it, I think part of why we are here is to see, how do I make it so she goes from saying, right, there is no reason for me to engage, to talk to the police, to do all these other things, to a, maybe I won't trust you 100%, but I can understand how we are building something stronger long-term, that we are getting somewhere. And I think even the angriest advocate who is out there right now, and there are some that are saying, I want to abolish this department, I want to do this, that, and the other. I disagree with them politically too, but I think it is worthwhile for us to make sure that everybody knows that this board, this city, everything here exists for them too. I will give another example, and I promise I'll stop, but this may be a useful conversation for us. We were dealing with issues relating to the unhoused a lot through the spring. I went and visited with a lot of folks. I remember one day I went to the Westport encampment, and there was a lady who started yelling at me as soon as I got there. And I got kind of hot and jawed back at her. And it was interesting because I was talking to one of the officers I spent time with, and they said, you might have gotten OCC'd yourself for something that you said in response. But something that pulled me back was, instead of just saying, well, I'm just going to fight you and all of that, again, understanding the position that people are walking in, because fundamentally this is a place I think we all agree. I live a block from where a gentleman lost his life the other day due to gun violence. And I was talking to a lady who lived in the neighborhood, a Black woman who has been there for about 15 years. And she said, I just want my community to be safer. And I think that's what everybody at least has as a basis. We have different views of how we can get there, but I do not think in any way it is wrong or that we should ever dismiss those who say the way we think we can get there is having as much trust as possible, as much confidence as possible in our law enforcement community, and then advocating for ways to say how we can do that. For many of us, it would be as simple as just saying, trust them, you've known them forever, all that sort of stuff. But there is another group of the community that wants to hear, how can we, right? How do we do better? How do we change? How do we prove that level of accountability? And I think that's where at least some of us have to be in this conversation. And that's where I would challenge Pastor Edwards. That's where I would challenge anyone, myself included, who still want to speak to those who say, Lucas or Edwards or PD or anybody else, you ain't worth this, such and such, I don't trust you. Because I think fundamentally, unless we do that, then there will still be that person of the hundreds who were there on Sunday when 4 people got shot, who drove away and ain't called us. And then to the next shooting and the next shooting and the next shooting. That to me is how you will solve these things long term. And that to me is actually, if we want to support the department, that's how we can support them the best, right? Helping them do their job in that regard by building up that very amount of trust. So I know we've all said it's gone long, but it's an interesting chat. And so I hope we continue to focus on that. Pastor Edwards, thank you for giving us the forum at least to begin addressing them.
Pastor Edwards, I want to thank you very much for stepping up when you did. You've been at it now for quite a while, and I think you're seeing a lot of progress. I mean, these things don't happen quickly. It takes good judgment, and I think that you definitely got the right name for the movement, getting to the heart of the matter. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Anything else? If not, Chief Smith?
Good morning.
Morning.
I don't have a lot this morning. We talk about the city's orders on street parking a little bit. I wanted to make an announcement. First, I wanted to talk and thank Heather Hall, who was very nice in saying that the police department was very instrumental in Missouri Able, but was actually Councilwoman Hall who called and said, this is a great program and you should be involved in it. And she was 100% correct. We should be involved in it. And as I been in the organization for 34 years now, I know many officers who have special needs kids on this department, and things like this that we can do to make their life easier or extend that, I think is a great accomplishment. So I just wanted to say thank you, Councilwoman Hall, to bring that to us, because I think it will really make a difference in the lives of our families. So thank you. The announcements, I would like to announce today that we are going to promote 3 deputy chiefs. That'll be effective Sunday. So I'd like to introduce Major Mike Hicks. Want to stand up, Mike? be promoted to deputy chief. Major Joe Mayman will be promoted to deputy chief, and new deputy chief Mike Wood will be our 3 new deputy chiefs. That'll be effective Sunday. We will have more promotions out of that, and shortly I'll get with you when that ceremony is. So if you'd like to attend, you'd be able to attend. The other thing we have on the agenda is the parking, the city auditor's on-street parking audit. I have the letter here. We've been going through this on the department, and there's still some more work to be done on this and some more communication back with the city. But one of the things, and Carl Oakman has some more information depending on how detailed we want to get on this, but the department did not achieve the minimum 10 parking control officers, one of the things listed. Well, I think we didn't during a time when we didn't know when the budget was going to go, and we didn't know what we were going to get, and we didn't fill positions. As I've talked to many of you, those positions in parking control are many people who want to come to this department and then become a police officer. And I'll give the example of one of our deputy chief's sons who went there and was hoping to secure a position. And when those employees found other employment of agencies that were hiring for law enforcement, they left, and we didn't fill the positions because of COVID and the pandemic. But right up to that point, we had been fully staffed and engaged with the city on parking control issues. And again, I don't know how technical we want to get here, but Carl has a bunch of more information if we need it. The other thing is that it says KC's parking control activities and strategies do not support the city's parking overall strategies. And that is, I think, a very misleading statement. We've been part of the overall parking strategies from the city from the very beginning. That's why we took on extra parking control. That's why the city paid for that out of the parking fund. We have been working with the city to encourage off-street, short-term, on-street parking, long-term garage parking. That's been part of the plan overall and our position in that. We think we have worked with the city, attended the meetings. I know during last year, there was many meetings. Most of those were virtual. I believe we were involved in most of those also. So I would like the board to know there'll still be more discussion on this. And I saw the city manager's reply that he thinks that we should shift parking control back, downtown parking control back to the city. I don't know which direction that will go. But from our standpoint, we think we're doing the right things for the right reasons, helping the city manage the parking issues.
Mr. Chair, I might say a few things in connection with that. First of all, Deputy Chief Hicks, I have not had the opportunity to work with you that much. I look forward to working with you more. I've seen you in meetings of late, and so we look forward to it. Deputy Chief Mabin, we've gotten to interact just a few times, and it has been an honor and a pleasure, and we look forward to that. And then Deputy Chief Woods, I feel like we've been in the fire a little bit, and so congratulations to you. You've always been exceedingly respectful and a very good officer, so we look forward to working with you further. I wish to discuss the parking control issue because the city auditor doesn't usually lay out a report as strong unless there are perhaps some real concerns. And so as I see it, his representation was the April 2018 MOU between the city of Kansas City and this board actually suggests that there would be 10 parking control officers and that there are only 2 parking control officers right now, at least for the downtown corridor. And then I think the other suggestion, of course, is, yes, moving it back in-house. The theory, I think, being both from the auditor's report, perhaps the manager's work, is that the parking enforcement isn't being done at the level the city would otherwise want. I think the Chief, you've answered it somewhat, but I guess the question I would have is, why should the city not look to another approach if certain things like enforcement, car moving, revenue generation, et cetera, aren't being addressed from the current process. And I don't know if that's for Deputy Chief Oakman or.
You're gonna have to go to the podium, sorry.
Always bring your notes. Sir.
Right.
Well, first off, on the staffing issue, I want to address that. As that memo came in in 2008, we had 4 parking control officers when we agreed to that. In January, by June of 2018, we had 11, July 9, August 8, September till the end of the year, we had 9 in 2018. 2019, we started the year with 11. From January to March, April, May, June, and July, we had 14 parking control officers. August, we had 12. September, October, November, we had 11, and we finished the year with 10. 2020, we started the year with 12 in January. January, February, March, we had 12. April, May, June, we had 11. July, August, September, we had 10. In October, November, and December, we had 9. So from middle 2018 to December of 2020, the least amount we had were 9. So regarding that staffing. Now, 2021, we
Can I ask
started.
a quick question.
Go ahead.
Is that specific to the downtown area or is that citywide?
That's in general, and the majority of them would work downtown. We break it out. Usually it ran from downtown to the plaza. And a lot of this was geared towards 311 complaints. We would receive several 311 complaints in the neighborhood as well as downtown. Also of note, so in 2021 is when we ended up with 6 parking control officers, and a lot of that was due to what the chief mentioned. We had several that left to pursue other opportunities in law enforcement because when you talk about one of the good things, in addition to, and this is a side note on that in 2018, on that MOU agreement, that also allowed KCPD to look at creating another avenue towards recruiting, specifically minority and female recruiting, because the majority of those parking control officers we were able to get were female and minority, who in turn was pursuing a career in law enforcement. So it was an excellent opportunity for that. But when you look at mid-June of last year with the pandemic and the fact that we didn't have academy classes, we lost several of those individuals to other departments. In fact, we lost just in December, we lost 2 black males and 1 black female who were going to our police academy to other outside agencies. So I just say that to par on that. So in addition, something else I would like to add to that is when you talk about the parking strategies of the city, from 2005 to 2018, when I was part of the city liaison, I was also on the safety and security committee for the streetcar from the beginning. So our parking control strategy was in step with the streetcar authority because there was issues downtown along the River Market area, which was one of the reasons for that strategy to get people to park in parking garages because they were blocking the access for the streetcar. So we came in with several parking control officers downtown to clear that and keep that avenue clear. So, and as you notice, we have very few issues around parking blocking the streetcar. So that was all part of it. But like I said, I understand there's a strong audit from the city auditor, but like I said, we will have a detailed response, but the staffing, that's just not correct.
What say you to the representation? I think if he were doing nuances or here, he would argue that the 10 parking control officers were to be downtown specific. But I think to an extent you've addressed that. What say you to the, I guess, contention in his report that roughly $1.7 million has been appropriated for the downtown parking enforcement, but that it seems as if it's, I guess, been used in a greater than downtown area. Now, perhaps just downtown of the plaza or citywide, but I think, and I have some memory of this when the prior city manager had announced this effort, there'd be enhanced enforcement, parking control downtown, among other things. I think the thought of council and the manager at the time was that you would just see, 10 cars downtown all the time, and that the 1.7 million, I believe, appropriated for it would go to that. And I think his critique is that perhaps it is not. Is there a plan perhaps to correct that? Or is there a plan, I guess, to go back to the city to suggest that there is a better, swifter way to do parking enforcement that is a more river to Brush Creek type of thing? What's the answer and the approach there?
Well, first off, we are now that with the change in the budget, we are actively recruiting and hiring parking control officers. So we will get that number up and you will see the effect. One thing I may add, in addition to using the number of tickets we issue, is not always an accurate way of doing that, because oftentimes the real key is to get the people to move. So on the majority of interactions downtown, the PCOs or parking control officers are often finding out who those vehicles are, and oftentimes they're getting moved before they're issuing tickets. So a part of them, I want to be clear that a part of enforcement is getting the people to move the vehicles, and that is a majority of it. But there are situations where you have to write the ticket. Oftentimes, they try to avoid that if we can get the owner to move the vehicle. So that happens quite a bit downtown. And based on, like I said, their area, having 2 assigned down there at the time when we had 6 people, that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the only 2 that are down there. Oftentimes we would have, depending on what's going on, oftentimes all 6 would be downtown. Or when we had the 14 or the 12, a majority of them would be downtown, depending on the day of the week, what was going on, and what activities were going on downtown. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit of that.
Well, and I would like to add one thing, Mayor, is that there's parking issues all over the city, not just downtown. And we get all of those through 311 also, and calls throughout the city about parking issues throughout the city. So we try and defer most of that to our parking control officers and not send officers on that. So even though the audit directed downtown, it did not at all acknowledge the rest of the parking issues throughout the city that this department handles.
And one more point where you talked about the number being down downtown. March, when you look at from March to the end of May, the city did send out correspondence that there would not be enforcing tickets unless they were emergency issues. So that didn't really pick up until June. In addition, with the number of people that were not downtown in that period, a good 4 months where downtown was a ghost town. So it's pretty difficult to have illegally parked cars when no one's there. And that's what we found out in that 3 to 4 month period. There was very little vehicle traffic downtown. Oh, I'm sorry. You have any other questions?
No, sir.
All right, thank you.
That's good. I think that's a good discussion. There's always always another side to every story. So thank you. Is that it, Chief?
That's all I have, yes.
Any questions for the chief? If not, we'll go to public comments, and I think we have Stephen. Georgilakos? George Lacos.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Commissioners, the mayor, everyone here. I thank you for being here. I want to tell you, first of all, I'm a proud American. I'm a proud out gay man who's lived through a great deal in my life. I lived in New York for over 50 years. I was a first responder, a public first responder that didn't write my name down after 9/11. I lived through that. I've worked in the White House. I've done many things in my life. I am from Kansas City. I was born here in 1952. My father was a fireman who worked in Kansas City North with police and firemen. So I had a sense of respect for the police. All right. My life was changed as I came back here in 2002 after my life changing in New York after 9/11. We left for health reasons and other things. I came back here. We shopped at a supermarket in Westport. The supermarket's name is Sunfresh. On September the 4th, Labor Day of 2017, everyone, that's how long it has taken me to get here. I'm trying to be composed and real because I respect you all and what you do. But you're not grasping the public if you don't realize and understand the story I am about to tell you. On this day, Labor Day, the 4th of September, 2017, my husband and I, who was frail, we are both HIV positive. We are what you would call long-term survivors. We watched all of our friends die in New York City in the 80s, all of them. We survived it, and by the grace of God and the pills that exist now, as much money is being made off of it, but that's another thing. That's just the country and the greed. My husband is sicker than I am. I'm the strong one in the group. I'm 69 going on 70. And on this day, standing at Sunfresh at 12 o'clock on September the 4th at Sunfresh Supermarket, I set a divider down on the conveyor belt as I waited, and a very strange woman's in front of me with nothing to put on the belt. I came up with my cart. I had taken my husband, who's frail, to the flower department and sat there with one of the people we knew and thought were our friends for over 20 years. Then I get there, I put down the divider on the counter, and the woman screams at the top of her lungs. And in that second, gentlemen, 2 officers, police officers working as security guards at Sunfresh, grabbed me by my hands, twisted me behind, lifted me off the ground, and walk out of Sunfresh. You go to the right or the left. And they bashed my face against the thing. And they told me, and I'm not supposed to use foul language, they told me to get the F out and never effing come back here again. How am I supposed to deal with that? How is anybody supposed to be safe in Kansas City when the people that protect you are attacking you? Then I was asked over the phone, and and then within 9 days, by the 26th, I'd gone to the 1200 Linwood Boulevard to the officers to report it. The female officer browbeat me, treated me horribly as I'm there struggling with my husband who's outside on a rotator, can't get in here. And I'm like this, and she's treating me like I'm a fool because I got the courage to tell her that I was attacked. Then when I went to the gentleman to ask why and called back the people at Sunfresh, talked to a manager named Dale, who I know they all knew who we are. Is there anything wrong with being yourself in this life? It's all we've got. Once we're gone, that's it. I'm going to be cremated. There's not going to be a tombstone for me. One of a million people, millions that are still dying from no cure from HIV, but everybody's making money off of it. So how I'm asking all of you And I'm not expecting answers, but I God well hope you will listen. Why would I be attacked for going to a supermarket? Do you realize the laughter and the ridicule I faced for the last almost 4 years telling this to people? And how many people who are gun owners here, conceal and carry, would say to me, well, I'd have pulled out my gun and shot him. And I thought, I don't like guns. What can you say to me? I was attacked and brutalized. Every lawyer here turned me away. Everybody. The one lawyer I did get screwed up the case I had so terribly bad. It was pathetic. And now I look at everybody and look at everyone looking at me now as if people like me are a rarity. And I can tell you this, I know in my gut, I'm not a stupid man. I trust my life. I trust my feelings. I know who I am. I'm very empathic. I felt that the police were always looking at us and like stink eyeing us when we walked in. And I was wondering why, gentlemen, why? Because we're two gay men who had the ability to hold arms and walk down the street and care about each other. Isn't life about having someone and living and dying and having somebody to hold your hand when you die? This is out of control, that you are the people that I had to come here to do this and talk to. And I see you all looking at me like I've got 3 heads. You don't get what's going on if you don't understand this. I lived in New York for so long, I forgot Kansas City. I know you New York better. Now I'm back here. I went through madness just to get here. And do you realize that I went to, with a friend from North Carolina, to 18th and Vine within the last year? To go because she was from North Carolina. She wanted to see it. We ate there. The point is nothing's there. Why can't Kansas City get past this arbitrarily deciding the east side is black people, the west side is white people, that all this redlining stuff doesn't help anybody here? In New York City, they got beyond it. In New York City, the east side and the west side, no, you couldn't go to 110th in Harlem. Now everybody at 125th in Harlem, they've got $4 million brownstones. The whole city is incorporated. You get it? All together, not east side, west side. I left here, I was here in the 60s when the riots happened, and I learned about racism from my black neighbors who moved into affluent white neighborhoods when the riots happened here. I was forced to sit and watch it. And I learned then racism isn't about the color of everybody. It's about what you got inside. If you care about other people and you want to be heard, what do you have to do? Would I have made more sense if I pulled out a gun and screamed and yelled and went back to those guards? They took my ability to go to my own grocery store. All of my friends, they hid. The man that attacked me, they hid. They got down on the ground, everybody. I looked up and there was nothing. You couldn't hear a pin drop. That's the way I was treated. You tell me why that goes here. There is no gay community here. Nobody has my back. I called people, lawyers, even trans lawyers. Everybody would call me back. The qualified immunity law here is a joke. It makes you all think you can do whatever you want to somebody. Well, that's not right. It makes no sense. You brutalized me and it's not over. They screwed up the case, but I know what happened. I'm not stupid. I may be taking hardcore drugs to keep alive for 1 million years, but I am not stupid. And I look at all of you and I realize you aren't either. So can somebody hear me? Can you all listen to me? I'm almost 70. I'm a gay man and I got bashed in my own supermarket and people hid from me. Every other time, for the rest of the time you go, you're fist bumping with the butcher. How's everybody? How's your kids? How's Sadie? Yeah, but then when the time comes, everybody's hiding. Hiding because that's the way they do it at Sunfresh. Because they take care of the cops and the cops take care of each other. I am sorry, folks, this blue law stuff has got to quit. I don't want to be in this state anymore. I don't feel safe here. You guys have to look at yourselves. Don't you think it's how long it's taken me to come here and get here and all the stuff and the problems trying to get through? I'm not on the internet. I don't trust the internet. It's screwing up our country, if you haven't noticed. So why should I get on the internet and be another email that nobody looks at? And Mayor Lucas, may I address you and say, I've tried to phone you many times. And for your information, sir, I'm from Kansas City too. 3411 Highland I grew up in. Watched everything happen, watched it change. And I take pride in it because that's who I am. But I don't think that because of that, it gives me any privileges. Where I went away is I saw something else. I came back here and then I realized that here, my life's not worth anything. So I don't know why anybody would want to stay here unless they got a job that would allow them to, and they felt loved and embraced by the community. That's exactly the opposite of what you're doing. And when you push away the LGBTQ community, you push away a world of people, brilliant and smart, kind and indifferent to pain and suffering, because we go through it every bit of our lives. And I'll be damned if I'm going to watch another generation have to act like they have to come out of the closet and prove themselves. Hello, newsflash, my parents were heterosexual, but I'm gay. I'm not ashamed of it. Why should I be? Can somebody help us? Can you address what happened to me? Why should that happen to anyone? Ever. I'm sorry to yell. Ever.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is George Alakis. I'm not ashamed of who I am, and everybody here and what you like or don't like is not going to make me ashamed of who I am. Shame is a personal thing. If you don't have self-esteem, you never will. So when you find you have it and you've made strong, this is the low point in my life. I've worked with them in the White House twice. I've done and met a lot of people. I would surprise you. Oh, please, it doesn't matter. I'm a fool now. You're looking at me like a freak. But yes, every single thing I've said is true. As God as my witness and all my dead family. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Got Silvestro Battaglia. Maybe. Cheryl Ferguson.
How appropriate. Because I'm normally the person that comes in here yelling at you guys. So I'm so glad that someone that does not look like me posed the same problems that I've been here about. Mayor, thank you for speaking up to this man that would rather have calm people pacify what's happening. I'm sure you've been around long enough, Garrett, to understand that rioting and protesting is the voice of the unheard. Did I say that calm enough for you so you could hear me? Rioting and protesting is the voice of the unheard. That is the reason why you see me come here before you every single month, upset, irate, and say things that I don't care if it offends you, because of people like that. Exactly because of people like that. Where he said he's not stupid, I'm not stupid. I heard you when we were not allowed in this public meeting, the same as we're not allowed in this public meeting today. And before I go on, I was asked to ask, Mayor, you've alleviated the mask mandates and you've helped to step back some of the separation that we've had due to COVID effective May, correct? So
Yes,
board,
ma'am.
I ask you, when will you allow your public meetings to become public again? Can I have an answer, please? Can I have an answer, please? So it's the
We're not
requirement
answering
for everyone to sit there stoic and not respond to the public? That's part of the problem. Chief, thank you for attending the meeting last Wednesday. I have a question for you. I hope you'll be able to answer unlike your superiors. Have you heard of both the Guardian and the Warrior type policing? And what do you think that your mentality of operating this department fits in?
I think there's probably times for both, but I think for the most part, I like to say we're ambassadors for the city. You know, we're out in the city every day.
Ambassadors is one thing, but as far as the way that you engage with people would be either the Warrior or the guardian type mentality?
Oh, I think when we engage with people on a normal level, it's all just guardian. It's just looking to help people. Yes, but there's no doubt that we train for both.
I'm actually just going to spend the rest of my time reading to you, and I'm going to actually state some of the things that I brought up to you in our last meeting. When I brought up, and I'm speaking of this past Wednesday, when I brought up the chains that you have chosen to place outside of this building and the mindset of why that they're there, and the fact that what you intended to do, those chains don't do, but what it has done instead is create a rift between the community. So I'm going to spend the rest of my time here reading to you. I think you guys have had enough today that you need to digest everything that that man told you. And if that didn't trigger anything within your emotion, you need to evaluate yourself as a human. I wasn't even in the room while he was speaking, but just hearing, I am still choked up. So I'm reading to you from police1.com. Val Van Brocklin, Warriors versus Guarding. And is a shift in policing or just semantics? So I just want to read this excerpt to you. These police professionals argue that a primary warrior mindset actually makes officers less safe by creating avoidable violence because violence is rare in police-citizen contacts. A constant warrior mindset and tactics can also trigger a negative or violent reaction that was avoidable. And I've seen this on very many occasions, and not just in that incident. So what that speaks to is once you've established that you're at war with the community, as on many occasions this department has done, you are also creating what happened this past weekend on 18th and Vine. What you are seeing is the community policing itself. So where you guys have an dismal solve-rated homicides, the community is actually excelling at their solve-rated homicides. The only problem is that it's creating more homicides in the process. So if you expect to have effective policing, you need to change your mindset and your model. Treating every encounter with a warrior mindset and every citizen as a potential enemy does not build cooperation and trust in the community. If the community doesn't cooperate with the police, their job is more dangerous. Guardian mindset proponents believe that the officers can be trained to be tactically safe without approaching every citizen as a potential enemy combatant. If we're warriors, who are we at war with? You guys are here to protect and serve. I've had people tell me that it's almost, as I normally am, sarcastic, that it's in parentheses. Because, yeah, we're protecting and serving. But if you don't change the mentality of treating every person, including protesters, as an enemy, you will continue with the current model that you have that is unsuccessful. You will continue to have the homicide rate increase as it's already done this year. We are already on track to have a worse year than last. And none of that is missed on me. I have people just the same as you guys think that I'm always attacking you. I'm also always being attacked. I'm actually more so attacked because I'm willing to engage with and have conversation with you guys. But I heard Garrett it might have been November or December, I can't remember the specific month, make a statement that he was open to talk to anyone. So I emailed. I did what I was supposed to do, to ask for the contact. Ask for the contact information so that I could do just what he said that he was open to do. And instead of getting a response of, here's his number, or may I have yours and we'll have him call you, what I got instead was a snarky reply of an email, which, by the way, when I made that statement about Twitter, Garrett, it wasn't about you, it was about the police department. The KCPD model of policing in Twitter is very sadistic. And I think you guys have seen enough of that feedback talking about how the way that you talk to people. So maybe you need to look at, are you going to be officer friendly? Officer friendly still solved crimes. Officer friendly solve crimes at a greater rate than you guys currently do. You need to, if you're intending to continue as a department that really wants to have the community engagement and trust, you need to change the way that you're practicing. I'll leave you with that because you just got enough before me.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay. Need approval of the minutes of March 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Tolberg, second by Mayor Lucas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Deputy Chief True.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning.
My items are located under tab C in your book. And my first item, item A, is a new bid for ammunition. Every year we purchase ammunition and we bring this to the board around this time every year. This year it's just a little different. We had 2 people respond to our RFP. We're asking the board for approval up to $660,183. We're going to purchase off the state contract for Missouri until that sunsets. We think we can save about $100,000 by going that way. Ammunition, as you know, is very hard to get right now. It's expensive. It's gone up quite a bit in the last 2 years. So we're asking for approval of the bid. We're going to buy off the state contract because it's a little cheaper until it sunsets in November, and then purchase it from Gulf States.
I move approval.
Second.
Move approval by Commissioner Dean, second by Commissioner Tolberg. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. The next item, item B, it is to accept $69,693 from the Police Foundation. If you do accept this, then my next item will be to purchase items. And this is for the body worn camera project.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Tolberg, second by Commissioner Dean. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is item C. And thank you for approving that donation. This is the purchase for body worn camera accessories. The cost is $69,693, and I recommend approval.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Garrett, second by Commissioner Dean. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item, item D, this is for additional equipment to purchase for the arbitrator in-car camera system. So this is the in-car system that actually has mics and the cameras for inside the car. This is funded with the Equipment Lease Capital Acquisition Fund, which is our fund number 323 from the city. It's a city fund. So I recommend approval to purchase these items. It's for $416,845.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Tolberg, second by Commissioner Dean. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item, item E, it is approving the acceptance of the 2021 Combat Commission money. This flows through the Jackson County Combat Fund, and this year we have been awarded $300,000, and it pays for salary, fringe benefits and overtime, office supplies, and travel for formerly, like, it's the DARE program is what this pays for. So I recommend approval.
Ask a question. And I think this actually relates to something we've seen in more meetings lately, where the department has reported back success areas and others. Is there any reason, and perhaps it would be a subsequent presentation, but the DARE program, just information on the number of students reached, the schools with which you interact, those sorts of things, I think could be helpful for us to know. And I believe we actually did have some folks present, that was 8 months ago, I'm forgetting, but just bring them back. I think it's an opportunity for us to see some of that community outreach that's been discussed, how it's been, reports back, that sort of thing.
And one of my questions was, has DARE adapted to this virtual? Have they done anything virtually?
You know what, I cannot answer that. Sergeant Catherine Coots is the sergeant that's over that.
Okay.
Maybe just bring her back per the mayor's suggestion. And I think there are those of us who still believe in having officer relationships in schools. That's an opportunity for them to invest in and develop relationships with kids. And so I think a continued understanding of the development and continuation of that program is appropriate.
Move for the approval.
Second.
Move for approval by Commissioner Tolberg, second by Commissioner Dean. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. The next item is item F, and it's acceptance of the Midwest HIDA Task Force Grant. This grant is 100% fully funded by the federal government. The award this year is for $1,105,945, and it's from the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And this is the 24th year of us receiving these funds, and I recommend approval.
So moved.
I have one question. Reading in there, it's something about a 20% minority hiring whenever these funds are used. Are we making sure that's being adhered to?
Yes, we always, minority recruiting is very, very important to the department, and we are always seeking ways to increase those numbers to make it more reflective of our community.
Okay. I second Commissioner Dean's approval.
Moved by Commissioner Dean, second by Commissioner Tolberg. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. The next item is item G, and this is a modification to the 2020 HIDA Metro Drug Force Task Initiative. We are being awarded $24,084 more. That brings the total award up to $1,130,029. And they just reallocated from some other, I believe it was the Kansas agencies that had not spent money. They reallocated them over to us. I recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Tolberg, second by Commissioner Dean. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item, item H, this is to pay for our contents. The city has an agreement with Locked In to be their broker for insurance. The city owns all of our buildings. They cover the buildings in case something would happen to it, and then we cover the contents. So this is approving a 1-year policy for our contents, and it is $243,500, and we're purchasing it through Zurich North America. They will be our insurance carrier.
So I have a quick question just to make sure I understand. I mean, obviously a 20% increase in the premium that's prior, used to be $200,000, now it's $243,000 is pretty substantial. And I also recognize, being in the business, that insurance is not really insurance, it's a payment plan. So in that regard, this $5,317,000 loss we had, that's a property loss. Is that what that was from the property room?
Yes, sir. And it worked out, that claim, when we did the claim, we really saw how important it was for the city and us to have the same insurance carrier, because it worked flawlessly. They just divided up what was part of our claim and what was part of the city's claim.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Garrett, second by Commissioner Tolberg. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. The next item, item I, is the renewal of our excess workers' compensation coverage. We are required by the Workers' Compensation Board of the state of Missouri to carry this excess workers' compensation policy. Again, the contract is through Locked In. They're the broker that we use off the city contract. They go out and find us the best policy, and the policy amount is based on a percentage of our wages, how much we pay. This year, the cost is $187,247, and the carrier is Midwest Employers Casualty Company.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Tolberg, second by Commissioner Garrett. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item, it's item J, and it is the purchase of Converge One installation of Dell EMC Power Store purchase. And I might, if there's any technical questions, I'll have to rely on my colleague, soon to be Deputy Chief Hicks. But this basically is in the virtual server environment, that equipment is out of life. We need to replace it. It's fairly expensive, but I know Hicks has worked tirelessly on this project to get this down to this amount. The cost of this project is $655,427.39. It is through Converge One. They will come in and replace the equipment. They will cover it for 5 years. We will have, it includes the service, and the renewal cost will not be incurred until mid-year of 2026. There's no annual cost. One-time purchase, and we should be good for 5 years. It's really the backbone of a lot of our software systems, our CAD system, arbitrator system.
So it's a necessary purchase.
It is.
We have a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Dean, second by Commissioner Tolbert. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. Item K is approving the budget for this year. This is the adoption of our fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. The budget for appropriations from all sources this year is $256,773.275 compared to the current fiscal year that we're in, which was $377,193. It's about a $9.6 million difference between what we received last year and what we received this year. And I'll answer any questions that you might have. And I would like to thank my budget staff. I have a great team of people that are very devoted, and they're all here. I have Christine Ryder, who is our budget manager, who works on our budget all year. Stand up, Christine. She doesn't ever likes to be in the limelight. And then Major Paul Lester, and then Captain Jonas Boffman. And they're my team, and they work. We pinch pennies like you wouldn't believe down there, and they do a great job. They keep me straight and keep me grounded. And if we want to spend money, our big thing is no. We tell the chief that a lot.
Karen, I do want to say, because I was more involved in the budget process this year than I have been in years past, and communications with you and your team. And I just want to second your accolades to your staff. You really do have an impressive group. And for someone who's fairly critical of the bloat of government, it is reassuring when you sort of crawl down into the belly of the beast and begin to understand and unpack. It's one of my criticisms. It certainly applies to myself as much as anyone else when we criticize those things that we really don't understand or know. That's an easy position, right? It's a convenient position. It's just not very informed. So certainly I would say that I've become more informed in this process and the contents of our budget and where we spend our money. And I'm reassured to know that the level of seriousness with which we take this money. Also, it's all the more sobering on the reality of when money is taken from us, whether it's unfunded, defunded, right, wrong, whatever it is. When that money is not there, it comes at a real consequence to this city, period. So we're going to feel it this year, but it won't be for a lack of effort on your part or the part of your team. So I just want to thank you and thank your team, all of them. You're a very competent bunch, and the level of importance that this plays in the life of this department cannot be overstated. So
A lot easier to approve if it were still the same amount as last year. But
It would be, and I would ask for everyone's support, including the mayor's, to get that extra money. I mean, if we could get that extra $9.2 million restored to our budget, it would do a lot for our department and a lot for the morale of the men and women of this police department who have tirelessly worked, this last year. And Colonel Oakman and myself did go over to the finance committee when they were talking about the fire tax. And I stood up and asked that they also consider us to be a part of that fire tax. And we didn't have the support.
didn't have any luck. Okay, so any further questions, comments?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Garrett, second by Commissioner Tolbert. All in favor, say aye.
Uh-huh.
Aye.
Thank you. And my communications update, I really want to thank Commissioner Dean for really pushing that 10-hour plan. They love it. It is going over really, really well. A couple of statistics I just wanted to report on. In April of 2020, so last April, We had 17 vacant positions. Right now, we only have 3. So I think that's wonderful. And then our overtime from last year, same time period to this time period, our overtime is down by $16,000, which doesn't seem a lot, but it helps. Everything helps. And that's about 459 hours of less overtime this year.
Chief, true. I went to see the communications unit this morning before which is the first time they've let me in. When I visited them in the winter, I said, I'll come back as soon as it starts and hear how it goes. And of course, that was February and I couldn't go into the communications unit. And then March, I wasn't allowed in, but they let me in today. But anyway, one of the things that they, as you say, are happy with that. They're concerned that they're not up to full strength and they're afraid there's going to be a freeze. Are we still allowed to hire dispatchers, 911 operators and that sort of thing?
We're still hiring them.
Okay.
We have, I know I gave approval last week to hire one gentleman, and I know Colonel Hicks has more that are ready, that are, in different stages of getting hired.
I would like you to convey that to them. And I'm going to go see the shift tonight and the one tomorrow morning, but I'd like for you to say, don't worry, we're still hiring, because it's been the only unit in the department where we could continue to hire people.
Continuing to hire for communications, yes.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Thank you. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Acting Deputy Chief. Oh,
Morning, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. The Academy Class Summary is under tab D. There's still 20 recruits remaining in this class, and they are still scheduled to graduate on July 8th. Again, this is a class made up of recruits from outside agencies. Our training staff is making preparations to begin another class in June in the hope that our budget would be restored and we would be able to begin as quickly as possible. I know that our HR is continuing to process applicants, and we have a number that would be ready to go if that is approved. Any questions about the class summary?
I have a question just about the academy in general.
Okay.
If we don't get more money for our officers to be in the class, does the academy, is it self-sufficient? Do we charge enough for these other departments in order to pay for the academy that we're running?
I would say that we're not self-sufficient. It is a service that we provide to our partner agencies in the metro area. We do receive some revenue for some of our training. We host outside training as well. That through our hosting, we're able to get some free spots in classes. So that's a way for us to get some additional outside training for our members by hosting. But the money that we receive just for the recruit classes from outside agencies is not enough to pay for our staff.
If this goes on long-term, we won't have our own officers and we'll have to close the academy.
Well, that would be a discussion we would need to have.
That's
I will
enough. I
say
don't
that
expect you to make that decision.
I'm sorry?
I said, I don't expect you to make that decision, but that's a risk.
Sure.
We do use, I mean, it's a fair question that she's raising, because I've raised it with you as well, that concern. You know, it is worth noting, we do use the academy for a lot of our in-service training for our department. So, you know, that staff and personnel that we use for the academy teaching on our outside agencies are also part and parcel of what we use for our in-service training for our own officers. So, you know, there is a continuing need there that we have. Fair question, and one that I was interested in.
I would say that we do have reduced staffing there now from what our normal TO is. We've had some promotions, some retirements from there. Those positions have not been backfilled. So we do have a reduced staff that reflects the reduced amount of recruit training that we're doing right now.
I would ask that maybe there is a report put together that said, if we were to charge this amount, this is what it would take to sustain paying our own, folks that do the training. So I'd like to see one that are realistic numbers and then one that says, here's what we're doing now. Is that possible?
Yes, we can certainly crunch some numbers and get that information for you. I can tell you that we charge, I believe it's $5,250 per recruit when they come through our academy. So they do supply.
I don't want you to do it now, but if we can have a report between now and the next meeting, I'd like to see that.
You're talking to somebody that runs the school, so he knows a little something about
What is
the
the size?
business. He's getting to the business aspect of it, and ultimately the cost it is per pupil or per head. What's that? What do these numbers look like from a business perspective? I think is that Bishop? Yeah.
That's basically what I'm getting to.
What is the size of the teaching staff at the academy?
I believe we have 5 on the basic side right now and a supervisor. Okay, just a couple items to comment on for general discussion, just to follow up on your inquiry on the DARE and the GREAT curriculums. We are continuing to teach those. However, we've also had some retirements and resignations from that unit as well. So we currently only have 2 that are teaching full-time. They're teaching virtually and in the classroom to approximately 300 students per week. So, and then our PAL youth attendance for the month of March was at 1,251. And just for a frame of reference, that's up 500 from the month of February and almost doubles what we had in January. The programming there is continuing to thrive, all of them, the boxing, the martial arts, the strength and conditioning, volleyball and soccer, all of those programs are thriving. And this Saturday, PAL, in partnership with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, is hosting their 6th annual clothing giveaway. If you want to see a little glimpse of the impact that PAL has on the community, I would invite you to come out that day. It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They'll be having their clothing giveaway. So with that, I have 2. If there aren't any questions about that, moving on to the consent agenda under tab K. I have 2 policies for consideration. The first is our response to primarily civil incidents. This policy was revised and updated commensurate with the creation of our First Amendment protected activities policy. That policy had some of that language was included in this policy. When we removed that to create that standalone policy, this one was revised and updated, just some minor changes. So I'm recommending this policy be approved.
Second.
Move approval by Commissioner Dean, second by
Mayor Lucas.
Mayor Lucas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And the second policy is our records management and retention and disposal. The department generates a lot of different types and varieties of records, and this policy sets forth guidelines for the retention and the disposal of those. A number of different elements were involved in the committee to formulate this, and we're recommended that this policy be approved as well.
I move approval.
Before you do that, so the custodian of records, it says is designated by the Board of Police Commissioners. So who is the custodian of records?
It's the commander of the records unit. It has been for years, but that's who our designated custodian is.
So basically, whoever's in that position,
Yes.
Regardless as to what their name is. So what are there any laws on how long certain records, how long evidence is, I mean, is there something that breaks that out for us? Since
Yes, please.
we're responsible, I kind of want to know.
Yeah, Commissioner, there's a Secretary of State retention schedule, and that pretty much lays out for police. There's a section called the police clerks, and that is applicable to the police department. So that, I think this policy has been in the making for about 4 or 5 years at least. And so there was a committee that was started actually before I was here. Attorney Cook was on that committee, and they used the records retention Secretary of State schedule as part of formulating this. And it has all kinds of details about here's how long you keep these kind of reports and these kind of reports. So that was part of the process.
So when there is evidence, you know, like I was looking at something about cold cases. So how is it coordinated that just in case a cold case is made warm again, but who made the decision to either keep or not keep those records?
Right, that's a good question. It's a little bit of a process, usually between the investigative element. So the detective on the case will consult with the prosecuting attorney on the case, and they usually decide when to release property. For a lot of matters, it's not until all the appeals have been exhausted. Other times it's if the statute of limitations has run and the case can't be charged. So typically that is a decision that's made between the prosecuting attorney's office and the investigative element.
Okay, because as I was reading through all that, I'm like, you know, there's so many unknowns that if something does come back up and you go back to look for it and, oh, well, you know, it sat here 5 years and we decided to give it the boot. 10 years, you know. All right. Thank you.
So, no further questions. Could we have a motion?
I moved already.
Oh, yeah. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Dean, second by Commissioner Tolbert. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
That completes my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Investigations Bureau.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Mr. Mayor.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My information is under tab E in your books. Before I review the monthly stats, I'd like to take a few moments to highlight some of the work a couple of our investigative elements have completed in the last month. First, I'll begin with a recent case worked by our Property Crimes Division. Earlier this month, the fire department ambulance was stolen from a hospital. We put that information out to our metro area agencies. The Raytown, Missouri Police Department observed the vehicle, deployed stop sticks, arrested a suspect. Our property crime detectives worked up the case and submitted to the prosecutor's office, who filed charges in custody. This is a good example of the good working relationship that we have with the other area law enforcement agencies. Also want to highlight the work of the Perpetrator Information Center, or PIC. Their mission is to provide intelligence support for criminal investigations. During March 2021, they assisted in developing persons of interest in 4 homicides, 8 aggravated assaults, 1 robbery, and 1 sexual assault. They also conducted 20 cell phone extractions, prepared 4 trial graphic packages for use in court, and created 9 intel packages for the Narcotics and Vice Division. These detectives and analysts play a critical role in the Investigations Bureau. I just wanted to highlight their work. I'll move on to the monthly violent crime statistics. To date, there have been 49 homicides in 2021 as compared to 46 in 2020. There were 45 at the same time in 2019, 42 in 2018, and 35 in 2017. In March of 2021, we had 35 non-fatal shootings compared to 36 in March of 2020. And from April 1st to April 26th, we've had an additional 42 non-fatal shootings. Moving to drive-bys, this year we've had through the end of March, we had 100 drive-bys. The number was exactly the same through that time period last year. Before I continue, I just want to say that although I've listed statistics on violent crime, we don't view victims as statistics themselves. We make every effort to get them connected to services, to identify the perpetrator, to arrest them, and send the best cases we can to the prosecutor's office. Also in your book, you can see the Narcotics and Vice Report. You see the monthly stats for that division. You note that narcotics-related arrests, narcotics purchases, and narcotics sales cases are down. Year to date, that'd be 70%, 82%, and 81%. One reason for the decrease is that the units that are tasked with these investigations have been assisting other units in the division on violent crimes cases. Even so, it should be noted that our seizures are up for the year. Cocaine seizures are up 218%. Methamphetamine seizures are up 38%. Marijuana seizures are up 137%. Fentanyl seizures are up 100%. And heroin seizures are up 710% year to date. I'll also discuss recovered firearms. KCPD has recovered 205 firearms in March 2021 compared to 237 in March of 2020. And year to date, we've recovered 518 firearms. That's compared to last year, we had 640 at the same time period. Lastly, I'll discuss case submissions. The total number of cases presented to county prosecutors' offices in March of 2021 was 394. And in 117 of those cases, the subject was charged in custody or a warrant was issued within the month. There was a 14.40% decrease in the total number of cases presented to county prosecutor's office through the month of March 2021 compared to March 2020. And again, that goes back to some of the proactive narcotics and vice divisions that have been assisting with violent crimes cases as opposed to their typical duties. You have a hard copy with some additional information regarding case clearances at your desk. We continue to work on providing that information in a streamlined format so that you can compare different types of cases submitted to the different prosecutor's office and see the outcomes based on each prosecutor's office. And subject to your questions, that's all I have to report. Yes, ma'am.
So this hard copy that we have, are we comparing apples to apples, like when it says under violent crimes, homicide, 8 submitted, 6 filed? Does that mean 2 of them, they refused to file charges?
No, well, it's a lot of information there. The case could be under review. Case could be declined. It just depends. What we're working on moving forward is to get a percentage of each case that's returned compared to each other prosecutor's office. For instance, we have so many more cases submitted to Jackson County than we do Clay and Platte County that we need to break it down by percentage. And that's what we're working on, and we'll have that in the near future. The packet that you have is a couple months in the making, so we have a lot more data than we did here 3 months ago, but we're continuing to work on that and move forward.
Because the one I was looking at is homicides and declinations. Well, it's homicides, Cass County. They only declined 1. And my question is that 1 of the 8? Sometimes we see numbers and the 8 will be the ones this month, and the decline we don't find out for 4 months later. Or a year. You're right. There's some of them that just sit there, and I'm trying to understand how we report that so we know kind of what's happening?
This has been very difficult. So if we go to our blue sheet here and it says under at prosecutor's office, that's 20 cases we've had sitting there waiting. And some of them are months and months and close to, 6 months, a year old. So it is very hard to capture that information, Commissioner. And I think that's some of the discussion between Commissioner Garrett and Joe about how we capture that and how we put it on a form. And it is a challenge. We're working through it, but I don't know that we have the best solution yet as we continue to work through this. But I think the idea is we're trying to gather what you want to get captured, and we know you want to capture that. Now, how do we present that?
You've summarized it correctly. That's what we want. And I was just trying to figure out if that's what we've got. And not yet. The answer's not yet.
I think you've got it somewhere in this packet.
Okay.
I think the idea is how do we get it concise and so that you can read it in a report.
And I got this packet, hard copy, this morning. Is that because you just don't have time to get it into our board books?
I think they were still working on it. I think
what I
they were
feel.
still trying to update the info.
Let me speak on that just for a little bit. First of all, to Joe and his team, who I met with a week ago or so, I really appreciated you all taking the time with me. I certainly, over the years that I've been on this board, my trips to the department, which have been many, and meeting with whether it's the chief or others, that's really where the rubber hits the road. It's much of what I was saying with Pastor Edwards about trying to make progress here. We make that sort of down in the trenches, not in these environments so much. So I appreciate you taking the time with me and your staff. And it was also, that was another thing that's reassuring, not that it was a surprise to me because it wasn't, but the level of competence and engagement that we have at this police department is really exceptional. And you're talking to a guy that's been in and out of a few of them. It's really exceptional. And I hope the public and leadership understands what you got. You got some real talent. And in spite of an environment right now that I just find maddening, it's remains shocking to me how encouraged and encouraging our department is, not just leaders, but up and down the ranks. So I just want to make that general comment that I value and appreciate that. I think, Kathy, when Joe and I met and talked about this, we're kind of trying to get this, presented in a way that's meaningful and understood. And so I think that probably those conversations what led to a little bit of a delay here, and it's a little bit of a work in progress. It's like the percentages that we talked about. It's hard to numbers. There's just not an equivalence there because of the volume increase at Jackson County. So percentages help us to better assess that. Percentage of cases that are being declined, percentage of cases that are being yellow sheeted or sent back, a percentage of cases that are being requested for further investigation or bad searches. My goal here, at least for myself, but is to understand sort of the environment that we're in, both in Jackson County and Clay and Platte, and where can we make some improvements in that relationship, and where can we learn? Are there things that we can draw from this statistically that inform us? Here are some weak spots or some soft points for us investigatively that maybe we can do better and we can address. As I've said to Joe, I don't want to be the solution in search of a problem. That's not what I want. But I do want to understand it better. And I think we're on that road. It's complicated. And at the end of the day, as I said to Joe, what I want a good, better sense of is, sort of how effective are we at getting our cases over the finish line, and recognizing that there's a big part of the last X yards to the finish line that we don't have any control over. So, the outcome of a given case is decided by folks other than the ones in this room. And I recognize that, but, are we doing everything we can do to get that toward that goal line? And if not, why not? And are there impediments or challenges that we're confronted with in any particular jurisdiction that are of a nature that maybe we can better understand and then maybe better address? That's That makes sense. That's kind of the essence of it.
I don't know if this is for Joe or if this is for Nathan, but in your working up these reports, are you trying to figure out a way to measure cases that are just sitting there?
Yes, yes, it is. And like we said, it's not streamlined yet, but there is a sheet that shows cases that have been in the prosecutor's office up to 60 days, 60 to 90 days, over 90 days. So that's in there too. It's just that you have to dig through several pages. I'm trying to get you an executive level, high level sheet that it answers the questions in as little pages as possible.
And I thank you for it.
That's the challenging part. It's a lot of data out there, but really distilling it down to what you need is what we're working on.
But that is, Kathy, that is I think an important data point is for us to understand how long these cases are in the life cycle at these various offices. And I recognize, again, I'm not trying to pick on Jackson County, because that's undoubtedly where most cases are going to have the longest lifespan because of the volume. We just need to understand it as much as anything else. And if there are, from that, there are some things that we can do to be of help, in trying to address some of that, and it's not just in our prosecution cases we submit, but, officer use of force cases, that are also things that can languish for long periods of time. And it makes it very difficult for us, both from a discipline perspective, our own discipline process to address all of that. And also from a public confidence, we don't want these things buried. We want them exposed and open. We want that process moving so that we're not caught in a situation where we've got cases sitting over there for long periods of time and we've got someone on administrative duty that we would like to move forward and address, but we just can't because we're still waiting on a prosecutorial decision. Those present real challenges for us from a human resources perspective. So some of the minutia that matters, right?
Any other questions?
Any further questions? Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Deputy Chief Mike Hicks. Actually, right, Deputy Chief. Right.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mayor Lucas. We'll find the Administration Bureau reports under tab F. We'll start off with the board report. Right now, the total backlog at the lab for 2019, 2020, and 2021 cases is 3,265. They've completed 4,820 cases so far this year. That includes cases from 2019 and 2020. Right now, we have 1,386 requests that they are working on. And some I'd like to point out, over half of those are just requests to look at firearms. And this is despite being down 10 employees. We are working on hiring one on a grant to fill a grant position, but they're still down 10. On the DNA portion, so far they have a backlog of 2,514 cases, and they've completed 1,155 so far this year. And that incorporates 2019 and 2020 cases too. But their requests are dramatic. Right now they have 482 requests that they haven't been able to work on yet, but they are getting to. And then the gun submissions, the firearms section has done an amazing job. 2,490 cases they've worked so far this year, with, again, the 700 pending requests, which accounts for 50% of the requests that the lab is working on right now. One more thing that's going to happen in May is the lab's going to begin their accreditation process. That's the audit that they go through every year. Without any questions, I'll move to the personnel summary.
Let me ask, on the DNA cases, are those categorized as Kansas City, regional, or other departments, or you just lump them all together?
They're all lumped together. The majority of them are KCMO cases.
Your manpower down 10 people, is that
Correct.
reduction in force?
Correct. It's just 10 open positions because of members leaving. We recently had a member that left and went to Utah to
Or
work
do
in
we have an
another
open
lab.
position, or we're not going to fill it?
We're going to work on filling some of them, but we won't be able to fill all of them.
Losing these 10 people, is that going to affect accreditation?
It should not, but it is affecting our backlog. Our backlog is growing. But Director Weiner is putting the emphasis in the areas that we need the most to get the best results for case closure.
We end up with a lot of overtime and that sort of thing?
The lab has some overtime. It's not significant compared to other parts of the department, but they do incur overtime.
Okay.
All right. The personnel summary from HR. Right now, KCPD has a strength of 1,808. Our budgeted strength is 2,026. So we are currently down from budgeted strength 218. As compared to 2020, we are down 38. A significant loss that we've noticed is we're losing our reserve officers, and we're not getting applications for new reserve officers at the frequency that we're used to. Right now, we're down 12 reserve officers. Our applicant pool for law enforcement right now stands at 65. That does not include 8 that we have on standby, which are current employees that are approved to go to the academy. Our applicant pool consists of 34 white males, 13 white females, 7 black males, 2 black females, 6 Hispanics, and 2 Asians. And then there's one that identifies as unknown. So our applicant pool is diverse, but we continue to lose our minority candidates to other departments. It's very hard to keep them because the departments around the metro area are hiring. So it's very hard to keep minority candidates within our pool. We also have 3 local laterals that are processing with KCPD.
3 local what?
Lateral transfers
They're coming
from
over?
other departments.
What do those applicant, and I want to talk to you a little bit about this comparison 21-20 versus on our loss on personnel, but those applicant, I'm very, very focused and interested in, what this applicant pool looks like compared to prior years. Because and maybe it's misplaced, but it would certainly stand to reason that this would be a very difficult environment within which to recruit to urban policing. So I'm just interested if you've been able to measure that in any reliable way, both in terms of the volume of applications that we're getting and in terms of the quote quality of the applicants that we're getting.
We haven't measured it, but there is a definite decrease in the amount of applications to be a police officer. The quality seems to be about the same. We're not seeing a difference in quality of applicants, but the amount of applications that we're getting to be a police officer is low. The amount of individuals coming to our testing is low. Our last test, we only had 12 people show up for a law enforcement test.
Well, and those are all, and I've tried to, preach this, but it's kind of hard in the moment. But the price that we're going to pay here, and I know this isn't really a question as much as it's a statement. The price we're going to pay it's not a price to be paid tomorrow. This is a price we're going to pay. In my view, we're going to pay the price for decades in this city, for decades. And some of us will be around to see that. Some of us won't be around to see it. But I'm just as sure as I'm sitting here that this community is going to pay a bad price for that in terms of the number of officers we have, the quality, frankly, of officers that we have. And people are going to suffer as a consequence. That's just my view of the world. Hope I'm wrong. I really, really, really hope I'm wrong. One of the things I want to note, because I'm interested, obviously, in the applicants, as I've noted, and what you've told me doesn't surprise me, although it alarms me. And when we compare 21 versus 20, also the one thing I want to track very carefully is what we're losing. You know, I know police departments around the country are losing officers at an accelerated rate, which again, you know, common sense would tell you why. You know, that's a big concern. And I hope that, you know, what I have experienced in my interactions with officers on the street and in the department when I have that occasion, you know, I'm shocked at how positive they are. And it seems to me that we still have a great energy in our department, albeit exhausted. It's tired. I think we can all speak to that. But I still have a positive vibe that comes from a lot of our men and women. That's a tribute to them for sure. But on that note, in tracking that, I'm not sure why we do this, and maybe it's just a function of the program, but in our law enforcement officers, you have it broken down on comparison of 21 versus 20 personnel actions, specifically on deceased, termination, retirement, and resignation of law enforcement. And you know, regrettably, we had the deceased, which I think we all know that was, and that was an unfortunate event for sure. But then retirements and resignations, which you know, total 28 there, but it says average per month 2.33. Well, that's not true, right? So that's annualized. So really, that's not how that should be, right? Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the way you calculate that is, you know, is that 28 into those 3 months. So actually, the annual average is 9.33 that we're losing per month, not 2.33. Right. You know, likewise, across all of our employ, which includes all of our civilian folks as well, you know, there we're ticking around about average of 2020, which is my calculation 15.66 versus 15.75. So it seems to balance when you take into consideration all of our civilian staff. But as to our law enforcement uniform officers, we're running almost 2 bodies ahead. So I just want to pay attention to that, and I just wanted to draw a note to that statistic because I think it's not, you know, I'm not a math person, but so maybe I'm wrong, but I want to make sure we're tracking that accurately so that the numbers represent what's really happening. Okay.
Something that I reported on last board meeting is just keeping the board updated on our current personnel losses. In April, by April 30th, we will have lost 14 members due to various reasons for separation, including 2 more reserve officers. In March, we lost 20 officers plus a reserve officer. And comparatively, March of 2020, we lost 11. So the numbers continue to increase with the amount of members that are deciding to leave the department. At this time last year, we were at 42 total. This time, or right now, we're sitting at 60. We have lost since January 1. And then on page 6 of the personnel summary, we have personnel actions involving various types of discipline. We start reporting on this every month just to give an idea of what KCPD is doing in this personnel action space. So far in the month of March, we've had no terminations, no demotions. There's been 4 suspensions of 14 days or less. And we have 2 further actions, plus we have a written reprimands of 6. And then so far year to date, we have 24 written reprimands, 10 that are pending further action, 5 that are 14 days or less, and again, no terminations and no demotions.
One of the things on that, and I was going to talk to the chief about that, but just to say it here, I appreciate that being, you know, something we addressed a while back, that being included in the book, so we have an understanding, albeit the closed nature of that, you know, with the personnel actions. But I do think, at least in a closed venue, I may be seeking a little more of an explanation about those. So just to level set with everyone, you know, when it's less than 14 days, it's not appealable to the board. So there's a limited amount of visibility that we have on those less than 14-day actions. And I would just like to make sure that the members of the board have a very clear understanding of those personnel actions. Again, I recognize the sensitivity of that, and most of that's appropriate in closed session. But I just want the public to recognize that that's something that we track and something we should track. Much like I speak to concerns in where we are with our narcotics activity or our property crimes, some of these other ancillary investigative elements, that people think of it in terms of, our shootings and our homicides. I stand by my concern that those feeder crimes that are escalators, into our more violent offenses, those matter, and we need to make sure that we're addressing them fully. So too, I think you can see instances where, history repeats itself even with officers, and that we're paying attention to these discipline issues and the accumulation of those and tracking those and tracing those and talking about them and thinking about them. Because I think that's one of the remarks from the public, and it's one that I believe to be well placed. We have a real responsibility here to ensure accountability in our department. So I just wanted to lay that out there, that I would like to have a little more of a discussion in the appropriate forum, about these less than 14-day actions, so that we it's just a part of our ongoing dialogue. Okay. Because there is something to that sometimes we see repeat offenders, and I think that we just need to be plugged in as early and often as possible.
If there's no questions, I have nothing further.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Deputy Chief Carl Oakman.
Good morning, members of the board and Mayor Lucas. Just before I get started, I just wanted to also publicly congratulate the 3 new deputy chiefs. They are fine individuals. I remember as a young commander sitting in the board meeting saying, man, I could never sit at that table and talk. No offense to the board. As we do every board meeting, is just wanted to go through some highlights of Patrol Bureau and interactions with the community. As I always say, this is a small sample of all the work the men and women do in patrol. And to kind of back one of Commissioner Garrett's point, I would have to agree with him. I am constantly amazed at the professionalism and the amount of effort that patrol officers go the extra mile to help those in the community, in spite of everything that we see in the news and just what's going on in general. I could tell you, I am constantly amazed at the attitude and the ability to just continue to serve the members of the public. And this is one of many food giveaways. I think this one was through the PAL, the Police Athletic League. And as you'll see, I'll go through some more slides. This is something that we really, across all bureaus, that members of the department had really got involved through the pandemic. And I think this is something that, as you can see, as a police department, we're going to continue to be engaged in. And as you notice, this was done on Easter. And I would like to point out someone wearing a nice spring Easter sweater, helping out at East Patrol to hand out hams. Next giveaway. This is an ongoing event up at the academy that's done by the Shoal Creek CIOs. And like I said, a lot of these food giveaways started during the pandemic. Prior to that, we were involved on a smaller level, but now, like I said, it's become a common occurrence in Patrol Bureau and across the department, and that's something that we're going to continue to do and be involved in. And community interaction officers at East Patrol, we talked about a couple months ago some other businesses that they visited, and they're going kind of in the area of East Patrol and trying to hit all of those businesses. And especially when you look at an area like East Patrol that has a large amount of Hispanic businesses, this is very important to make sure that the Hispanic community in East Patrol understands that they can trust the police, and we want to continue to build those relationships. So they're reporting crime as well as helping with members of East Patrol to reduce crime in those areas, because oftentimes we've had issues with a lot of those businesses being the victim of robberies. And this was an Easter breakfast from the youth at Calvary Lutheran Church, brought to Metro Patrol. And this really, when you see things like this, it really goes a long way for the officers, because as you all well know, having a career in law enforcement, you miss out on a lot of family time, you miss out on a lot of holidays. So this means a lot when the community thinks of those officers on those days. And this is another interesting story, and this is part of our social work program. This mother was robbed, and in her purse had all of her money. So officers at Central Patrol came together to make sure that they could gather money to buy a truckload of groceries, a $150 Aldi's gift card, and a new bike for her daughter's birthday. And this was helped coordinated with our social workers and the social worker at Central Patrol Division. And this next story, came across this young man on a call for service where officers were taking him into protective custody, and they noticed that the kid didn't have any shoes. So the social worker was able to get this individual some shoes. And this is just another example of how I know when a lot of us were in patrol, you didn't have that resource of the social worker. So it makes life a lot easier for patrol officers, especially when they really want to make a difference and do something, but just didn't have the resources available. And now we have those resources available. And this is just another example of officer ran into this individual that was on his way to a funeral and didn't know how to tie his tie. And this particular officer stopped to do it from him. And this is something that I really want to get out to the public, that when you see officers, it doesn't have to be a situation where you're dealing with a crime or something where you need the police. We are there to serve the community. So things like this, go up to the officer and ask. And one thing that I've done in Patrol Bureau is making sure that our officers understand to always appear to be friendly and approachable when you're in situations where you don't, we have situations where, as we talked about earlier, where yes, we have to be concerned about officer safety. We have to be aware of our environment, but there's a lot of situations where we just need to make sure that we're friendly and approachable. So you do have more encounters like this, because you can gain a lot of social capital from small interactions like this one. And just want to shout out to the communication unit. And I know Deputy Chief Karen True does a lot to show that the dispatchers are valued and a part of the team. But from Patrol Bureau, we just also want to thank the communication unit, with this being the National Public Safety Telecommunications Week in the second week of April. So just want to thank the dispatchers for all they do. And girl power. This was a situation where these officers responded to a call for service at this elementary school, and the female students were very exciting to see a call involving 3 officers, and all 3 were female. So they wanted to take pictures, and these are the things that help you with recruiting. It doesn't matter how many ads you put out, how much you do this. These are the things that are long lasting, that allow these 3 or 4 young ladies to be police officers. And I tell you, when you have a positive interaction with police at an early age, as you grow older, there's no one that can tell you anything bad about the police, because you know your first memory was a positive one. So that's something that we really want to try to instill in our officers, to make sure that they're aware of that when they come across young people. And then officer in the community, and there again, and you see this is another example of an officer just at Quick Trip, and someone coming up to ask him, and the officer noticed that this lady had lost her debit card, accidentally threw it in the trash. So the officer put on gloves and helped dig in the trash and found it, and then sanitized it and gave it back to her. And then the last slide, happy 47th birthday for KCPD. April 1874, we were established with the first chief, Thomas Spears. So this is 147 years celebrating KCPD. And that's all I have on the slide presentation. And paying attention, moving on to the monthly offense summary. And like I always like to say, to keep in mind, this is about a month and a half behind on stats. So as you can see, ending the month of February, homicides were down about 8%. But as I said, this is a month and a half down. I know March and early April were bad months. Up until February, we were below numbers of last year. So hopefully we'll see that trend start going back down. But something that I want to point out, and I know we always are focused on the homicides, and that's very important, but we're continuing to see a pattern of violent crime reductions in sexual offenses, robbery, and then on the property crimes, we've been seeing a consistent drop in burglaries over the last 3 years. And we've seen a significant decrease in robberies. So it's not all doom and gloom. We are seeing, and this has been consistent over the last 2 years, we have been seeing some trends moving downward in violent crime. Stolen property and vehicle thefts, that had been trending down, but here in the last year, we've seen that increase, and a lot of that's due to the catalytic converter crimes that that we're working with property crimes and doing some other things in patrol to try to get that under control. But that's going to take some other issues from the city and the state regarding scrapping and things of that nature. But we will definitely continue to do what we can do as a police department. But that's what's contributing to the increase in the stolen autos and property theft. So overall, all violent crime was down 8% compared to last year, and property crimes was also down 8%. Moving on to response times, slightly down on priority 10. There was no change on the priority 20. When it comes to overall response times, all divisions saw a decrease in response times from March, with the exception of Shoal Creek. Now, one of the correlations between that with Shoal Creek is of the 6 patrol divisions, they are experiencing the most vacancies. And we are looking at ways to address that. And as we talked about with hiring and the academy classes, we tend to start seeing the effects from our outlying stations first. And then that trend tends to move inward to the urban stations. So right now we're starting to see that effect at Shoal Creek. So we're looking at ways to try to balance out some staffing at Shoal Creek. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully if the extra funding is approved and we can get a class in June, hopefully we can offset that trend moving to any of the other patrol divisions. But usually the way it happens, it'll go Shoal Creek, North Patrol, hit South Patrol, and then start affecting the urban stations. So right now we're at Shoal Creek, so we kind of anticipate it coming. And total calls for service, no change compared to this time 2020. And moving on to the traffic summary, there has been a increase in traffic enforcement. As you can see, tickets are up from last month significantly, but they're still down from 2020. And if you notice on the breakdown of the tickets, you can see a increase in the seat belts. We're trying to really address that to see if we can help offset some of the fatality accidents and stress wearing your seat belt. It's like I say, that's been a 40-year problem. It's been a problem since I've been on. I'm sure it's been a problem since the chief been on. Seat belts, I tell you, the two things that have not changed is trying to convince people to wear their seat belt and not leave valuables in their vehicle. Those are the two things we've been fighting for 40 years, and it hasn't changed. The average traffic ticket is right now at about 1.46 per stop. And we've been tracking that for about 2 years to make sure that we're not stacking tickets on individuals. So usually what's happening is on those speeding tickets, the other ticket that they're usually getting is the seatbelt if they're not wearing a seatbelt. And that's something that we're going to be committed to doing so we can drive that message home to wear your seatbelt. And moving on, high crash locations. As you can see, and I want to point this out, the number of tickets as relation to the high crash locations, the goal has always been to use data to issue our tickets. So the ultimate goal is to reduce traffic crashes, and that's why we use data to support our enforcement. Overall, crashes still continue to trend down. And regarding parking control, we talked about it at the beginning of the meeting. We're down year to date about 12,000 tickets. And as I said, the factor the main factor is that period from March to June when the city had shut down ticket enforcement. Parking enforcement, as well as parking control staffing down about 8 people. So those are the things that had contributed to the decrease in tickets. Moving on, we issued 58 DUI tickets last month. I can tell you the chief and I I would say about a year and a half, we sat down and really discussed the DUI section and made a leadership change in the DUI section. And I mean, that unit has just performed leaps and bounds over what they were doing prior to that leadership change. And it created, because the officers in the unit wanted to work and do good things with DUIs, but it took a leadership change to make sure. And I tell you, every member, there's not any new members of the unit other than the leadership that we put in place. And I mean, that unit is leaps and bounds operating at a level that has been historic for that DUI section, which the more DUIs we get off the street, it's better for everyone in the community. So I just wanted to make sure I acknowledged the DUI section publicly on their hard work. Fatalities are down. We have, as of the report, we have 13 compared to 15 last year. It's always a good thing when fatalities are down, even if it's down by 1. And there again, when you look at the contributing factors, this time last year, no seatbelt, 70%. This year, last year in 2020, it was at 71%. So as you can see throughout the year, that is staying around 70% on the seatbelts. And like I mentioned, that hasn't changed. When you're not wearing your seatbelt and you're involved in a serious accident, your chances of surviving are extremely low. And that's all that I have for my report. If you have any questions, I'll take those now.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Atterbury.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My information is under tab H in your books. There is the regular monthly report. If nobody has any questions on that, I will move on to the 2 appeals that we have. The first appeal is a company appeal of a $1,000 fine against Eagle Security. There was a guard working at a location, and his license was checked and he was not licensed. The company has been fined once before in 2012 for the same issues. If you all have any questions for me, please go ahead.
Am I correct? I took a look at that in the appeal letter. Gentleman, well, I think he's maybe signed for both Frank Joseph and Mr. Class, but noted that there was a prior ownership during the 2012.
That is my understanding. Yeah.
You know any details about that? Was that
don't.
transition in ownership?
I do not know about that, and I apologize. Tammy is not here today, so I don't have the answer for that right off.
It seemed like that was if I'm reading his appeal accurately, it's essentially on that basis that the prior offense was by prior ownership.
That would be the basis for the appeal.
New sheriff in town,
Right.
type of thing. And
Right.
this is quote, our quote, first offense, right? Is that?
Yes, that is correct.
You know the size of this Eagle Eye Security?
I do not.
One of the things that's of interest to me when we apply fines $1,000 or $500 or $100. It's not the same to everybody. You know, and it was,
Right.
you know, my dad used to talk about this being a judge, and when sentencing formality and consistency was a big push, try to standardize that.
Yeah.
And of course, we just come from a little rural part of the state, but you know, it's how do you do that? You know, if you find somebody $100 for a speeding ticket, you know, the difference between Joe and Jim might be a lot in terms of
Right.
how
Right.
that is felt. So I think the same is true here in my mind. I just want to, as we talk about this $500 or $1,000, you know, we're not talking about imprisonment here, where a given offense brings a certain level of punishment, no matter what your fiscal lot in life may be. When you're talking about fines, the purpose of a fine is to discourage. This is not a profit center. You know, it should be to discourage continued violations and to encourage compliance, right? That's the goal. So I just think it matters if we know we're talking about a company that is, you know, 10 people, or we're talking about, like in your next appeal, where you're talking about a much larger entity, that feels very differently. And if the goal is to try to message this as a deterrent, I just think that's necessarily part of the calculation in my view.
And Commissioner, if you all want to hold this until next month, I can get that information for you. It's not a revocation or denial or anything, so the company will still be operating, and I can find that out if that's something you do want to know.
I'd like to know that, and I want to understand what it means to be on probation. What does that mean?
Right. I would have to have Tammy speak to that, but usually in situations where the company doesn't have any mechanism for ensuring licensing, or they need some assistance with the process, that's something that private officers will encourage them to create a mechanism to ensure that everyone is licensed. It might also include some regular checks, field inspections of their locations as part of that probation too. That's my understanding.
I'd like to hear more about that, and particularly in the appeal letter, or I can't remember which letter, but it said it was 500 the first time and 1,000 the second. And I think the point they're making is this is our first time, so it should be a 500. I don't know if that's the way it normally happens, but I'd like Tammy to explain it to us.
Sure, I'll have her.
And the same thing with the probation. Is it
Sure.
a year for the first offense usually, or is it 2 years for the first offense?
I'll find that out and get back with you.
Since both of these are fines and both sort of illustrate the quagmire in how we address these financial penalties against companies of varying sizes and significance, I think maybe it's best if we just push both of these. I might suggest we push both of these to a subsequent meeting.
I agree.
Common consent.
I agree.
All right. Thanks, Commissioners. That's all I have at this time.
How's that for a punt?
Well done.
I think he's getting hungry.
Good and faithful servant.
Yeah.
Well done, good and faithful servant.
Merrill Bennigan with a new annual report.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The Office of Community Complaints has provided to you in advance copies of its first quarter and March 2021 statistical reports, which are located under tab I in your board documents. At this time, I'll provide you with the most significant highlights of OCC's investigative activities during the first quarter of 2021. The office received a total of 40 complaints, which represents a 20% decrease compared to the first quarter of the year 2020, when the OCC received 50 complaints. During the first quarter of 2021, the office submitted to the Internal Affairs Unit 23 of the 40 complaints received to be formally investigated, which represents a 30% decrease compared to the first quarter of 2020, when Internal Affairs received 33 complaints from the OCC. During the first quarter, the OCC rendered dispositions on 22 complaints investigated by the Internal Affairs Unit and analyzed by the office. The recommendations were 4 sustained, 6 not sustained, and 4 exonerations. Please note that these initial dispositions may be subject to administrative review before becoming final. The internal affairs investigations of 8 other complaints during this time period were terminated due to non-cooperation by the complainant or administrative closures by the office. No internal complaints from members of the department alleging violations of conduct or procedures pertaining to community interactions were received during the first quarter, and no significant trends were identified during this reporting period. The office is pleased to share with you that we have been contacted by a number of business, civic, professional, and community organizations that wish to assist in telling the true story of the Office of Community Complaints, its history, its mission, its form, and its function. This assistance is welcomed as the organization continues to deal with a rash of misinformation that serves no other purpose than to negatively affect public confidence in the model of civilian oversight in Kansas City. We have also received a pledge of continued support from our friends and colleagues with the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, or NACO. Lastly, this Friday, I will be participating in the supervisor school as an instructor at the Regional Police Academy. My topic of instruction will be de-escalation for supervisors and will be characterized by scenario-based exercises that are reflective of the types of complaints that we have received in the office. This concludes my report. Are there any questions?
I'm thrilled that you're going to do the de-escalation with actual fact patterns. I think that's helpful. And I know that the department over the years has done de-escalation, but I want to emphasize that we want to see more of that and help our officers understand how to use it in every situation. Thank you. That's great.
Did you, I missed it just a little bit. Did you say there have been businesses that have approached you wanting to clear up the misconceptions that are out there about the Office of Community Complaints? Are you going to take advantage of that? Or?
Of course, we are in the process of scheduling virtual conversations to begin next week. Some have already begun, but we have a number that have been set up throughout the month of May. So we're really encouraged by that, and we're actually really excited by having that additional community interaction and participation in telling the story of the OCC.
Has that been recently that they've approached you?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was cutting my grass yesterday and I got a call from one organization wanting to have this discussion. So yes, it has been a recent thing indeed.
Mayor, we appreciate you doing that. I've applauded you a number of times as you're a very good steward over that department, and you're an extraordinarily competent man. So I think you're a great voice and a great ambassador, on this topic. And I just say to you what we talked about earlier, there are going to be some people who are never going to listen to you, Merrill. They're not interested in listening to you. They're not interested in learning. They're interested in hating on you. But I appreciate you taking the opportunity to try to educate people, those who really want to be educated about what the process actually is, how it's actually assembled, and the role it actually plays. I know it's a lot for you in addition to everything else that you're trying to manage, but that effort to educate people who are interested in being educated is a really valuable thing for this police department. So
thank you for your support and your comments.
I agree with Nathan. I also think it would be helpful if somewhere on the website, and I know you're probably tired of me talking about the new website.
Not at all.
But I would like for there to be information about the national organization and the kinds of work that is done all over and how we fit into that. Because I think there are people that don't understand that what we do is state of the art, or, whatever people call it. We're at least trying to do the best way for civilian oversight.
And we absolutely agree. And matter of fact, the information provided on the website we set it up to be provided in stages. We felt that making sure that the statistical information, past reporting, and all that other data was available first, but we will definitely get that ancillary material out and available on the website in short order.
Great, thank you.
If I may take a point of personal privilege, I know that last week we recognized as a country Administrative Professionals Day. And I just want to take a moment to give a shout out to our office manager, Ora Rogers. Without Ora, we could not get it done. Trust me, all of this organization of information that you have before you would not happen if not for Office Manager Rogers. So I just want to thank her personally for all of her diligent hard work. And also I want to thank my senior legal analysts, Johnny Crawford and Michael Walker. Oftentimes we operate behind the scenes. People don't know exactly what we're doing or how we do it. But there have been a number of times where I've had to make a phone call on a Friday night and have people meet me down at the office on a Saturday morning to put in a full day's work to make sure that we get the information out that needs to be taken care of. And last but definitely not least, senior legal analyst Karen Williams, who you'll hear from next. She has put together our annual report. She has done so for the past 18 years, at least 19, since we've started with the office. And she just does a magnificent job at doing it. And she doesn't ask for much, just make sure I get my letter in on time. But I just want to thank Karen publicly for all of the hard work that she puts forth towards not only this annual report, but also she's kind of stepped in and served as our website manager at this time. So she handles a lot of the information shares that happens on the website. So the next voice that you'll hear will be from senior legal analyst Karen Williams, who will provide highlights from the Office of Community Complaints annual report for the calendar year 2020. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Meryl said, I'm just going to provide just a few highlights, kind of the condensed version of what is in the annual report. So I know Meryl has mentioned before, we changed things up a little bit with the pandemic. First time any of us have ever gone through any of this. So we really started taking complaints via telephone and for the first time. And then also we saw that a lot of complaints came in online. And at that point, we didn't have our website. They were coming in through the KCPD website and our page on that, but that has still continued to this day. I'm not sure what our status on taking telephone complaints will be as we go forward, but we're definitely seeing an uptick in complaints filed on the website and complaints filed through the kcpd.org as well. So with that being said, we received 236 complaints in 2020. We sent 147 of those to internal affairs and handled 89 of those in our office through other means. So the majority of those 236 that we received were categorized as improper procedure, followed by improper conduct. A very distant third was excessive use of force complaints, and then of course our harassment, bias-based policing, and discourtesy made up the remainder. In 2020, 180 complaints were reviewed by Internal Affairs and submitted back to OCC. That contains complaints that were filed in 2020 and in the latter part of 2019. 114 of those had full and complete investigations, resulting in 8 sustained complaints, 51 not sustained, and 55 exonerated. And then we also had 66 that were closed for non-cooperation, complainant withdrawal, or administrative closure. Of those sustained complaints, those 8, it was 1 excessive use of force complaint, 3 improper member conduct complaints, and 4 improper procedure complaints involving 8 sustained officers total. Talking about the breakdown of the race and sex of our members and the race and sex of our complainants in regards to the members who are complained about, pretty much mirrors their representation on the department. When looking at the end of the year Human Resources report, we have approximately 72% of Caucasian employees and 77% of the officers complained about were Caucasian. African-American employees, approximately 16% of the workforce, 17% as the subject of complaints, 5% Hispanic in the workforce, 2% of complaints, and then 6% as identifying either as another or mixed race, involving about 3% of our complaints. Our complainants are primarily African-American, comprising 59% of those who filed complaints, and 39% of those complainants fall into the 35 to 49 age group. So I think that indicates to us we still need to continue our community outreach, especially in the schools, to make sure that we are getting the complaints that younger people do know about us, and with this new website and things like that, that makes it even more able for them to find us and utilize our services. It should come as no surprise, younger officers generate the most complaints, with those that have tenure up to 4 years comprising 23.6% of the of the officers that are on the department, of the sworn officers on the department, but they account for 47% of all officers involved in complaints. Obviously, longer the tenure, the reduction in complaints, and the majority of our complaints were filed against officers in the Patrol Bureau. Obviously, that should not come as a surprise either, followed by traffic and parking control. Overall, calls for service were down. I think obviously we know what that is for, the pandemic and people staying at home. But what was categorized by the department as self-initiated activities has increased due to how it's counted. So our methods in this year's report tries to reflect that. I think we're going to get a better scope next year of how that balances out. But while complaints as a whole have decreased since 2016, complaints that we've received in the office, we actually reviewed the most complaints in 2020, more so than we have in at least the past 5 years, and I believe it's longer than that. So I will answer any questions that you might have, but that's the short and sweet version. Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Very informative.
Very good report. Thank you very much.
Lastly, let me just add, mistakes of the head and not of the heart. I also want to extend a debt of gratitude to all of the administrative professionals with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, because without them, and I'm sure Chief, you can attest to this. I mean, there are a number of times when we need to solicit information for our investigations or just to provide some modicum of service and customer service to individuals who contact our office. And it's not us putting in, the sweat equity in those situations. It's usually the admin professionals and other members of the department who are putting in that work. So I just also wanted to thank them as well. That's all that we have. Thank you.
Merrill, one of the, and I want to spend some more time on this annual report because it's a lot of effort putting it together, and it's meaningful. It matters. So in this environment we're in right now, I mean, this is an important measure, right? When we hear allegations or perceptions of our relationship or lack of with the community, with our conduct, a lot of that should manifest itself in here. I mean, it's not dispositive. It's not the only measure, but it is a measure. So I say that to just speak to its significance and the significance that I view it, but also to encourage you, in your presentations at any point, always interested to see what's being reflected in the data. And again, the data it's not dispositive necessarily, but that's what matters. Same thing with Joe, and we're talking about with our prosecution efforts. And what's the data telling us? And so I'm just always interested in that. And I'm always interested in your observations. As you hear a lot of what is in the community right now, how is that reflected or not reflected in what you observe and what you see from the actual data? So there's not a question in that baked in that necessarily, but just an encouragement, one, to thank you for the work and to tell you how meaningful I believe it to be to the process, but also to encourage your real direct engagement on that with us, on your observations or your staff's observations.
One of the things that we'll be doing going forward in discussions with our database managers, that we need to be able to reflect what actually happens administratively with these complaints. Because a lot of people think that just because a complaint is not sustained or exonerated, that there's not some type of administrative action. It needs to be reflected that all of these supervisors are notified of every complaint that happens. So there is some internal review that happens with every complaint, whether it's sustained or not. We need to be able to reflect, when things are training matters, when those things are addressed, when things happen to be policy issues, we need to be able to show that also in the report, because usually when the annual report was initially set up, it was try to be put into alignment with what the national organization was doing as far as the collective of civilian oversight agencies. But I think that in times like these, we probably need to flesh out what we're doing more locally to actually reflect what actually happens in terms of how we handle the complaints and the type of information that shares that go on across the department, whether it be with the chief's office, the bureaus, the regional training academy. All of that needs to be reflected in some type of meaningful way to kind of dispel some of that misinformation that we're dealing with currently.
I agree with that totally. So if you can do that, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dean, you have an audit committee report?
No report.
No audit committee report. Mr. Kenner.
Yes, I think this is the line item that you've been waiting for, sir. Board elections. We need a new president, vice president, and treasurer.
Need a new one?
Well, I'm not saying we need one. I think you asked for one.
Are you campaigning?
We're having an election, right? So, okay, so
Are there nominations?
I nominate,
I cannot. Where are we starting? Who are we starting with?
which position?
President.
I nominate Bishop Tolbert.
Second.
Bishop Tolbert's been nominated by Commissioner Dean and seconded by Mayor Lucas, I guess.
Yes.
Nathan left.
Then we need.
Vote real quickly. No.
So do we want to vote on that, or do we
We
want
can do it as a slate if you want.
to do it as a slate? Okay, Vice President, who's, so nominate Commissioner Dean as Vice President?
Second.
And what else?
Treasurer.
Treasurer.
Between you or Nathan.
We'll nominate, this is out, really.
This is the time to vote now.
Nominate Commissioner Garrett for treasurer,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Dean.
Okay, the slate then is Bishop Tolbert as president, and Commissioner Dean for vice president, and Commissioner Garrett for treasurer.
Just call the vote. What I get elected to. Oh, okay.
Okay, all in favor of that slate, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hey, congratulations.
He didn't call for no's.
Oh, okay. I was ready. What do we end up
Okay,
with?
so,
President, vice president, treasurer.
I know I can't count.
I would also like to
We've noticed that.
congratulate our new deputy chiefs. Thank you.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Mayor Lucas, anything for the good of the order?
Well, congratulations, Bishop President. He gets more impressive titles all the time. No, it's an honor to serve with all of you. I will also say that congratulations to our deputy chiefs. This is a challenging time for our city, our country, but I know these are folks that are ready for the challenges before them, and I respect them. I will also say it'd be remiss for me not to just reflect on and really to continue to center the public safety conversation inside this building, but certainly outside. And I know others on this board have mentioned that, which is that we have too many people getting shot. We have too many people dying. And I always try to say, even if it seems like I'm further afield, how do we tie back whatever discussion we're having to that safer side of things? While it is good that we see positive trends in property crimes in other areas, I know that there are many Kansas Cityans who reach out, most Kansas Cityans who talk to me about public safety want to make sure that our neighborhoods are safer, that their kids will be safer. And so I encourage us to continue to have that focus. And I might even ask for even more space on that discussion. Deputy Chief Maben gave, I think, a fairly thorough discussion on where we are in some areas, particularly vis-a-vis what's been referred to our prosecutors' offices, what's been filed, what has not. I think the public would benefit from even further discussion on where our efforts are, particularly collaboratively with our federal partners, prosecutors, and others to really address, I think, those core areas of violent crime that folks have the most interest in. Right? That's largely why they watch us a lot. And so I would encourage that. I will also reiterate, it is my view, as city councils had open meetings for most of this pandemic, that we go back to a more open process. As of this Friday, the indoor mask requirement, if you don't, well, there's no requirement outdoors. Indoors, if you can have distance and space, then you can have meetings, or if everybody's vaccinated. And I'm proud that even Commissioner Garrett has gotten the vaccine. We couldn't have been sure No, I'm just playing with them. But hopefully that allows us to have that further engagement here for our next time. So there's a lot I could say. People usually let me say a lot anyway. So that's all I'll have for now. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Garrett.
No, I appreciate those words, Mayor. And in this conversation, which, this was a pretty good conversation today, including with Pastor Edwards, I'm all about and have been all about this conversation as it relates to the police department and policing generally. I want it to be an informed conversation. I do insist on that. I insist on it being civilized. I insist on it being constructive. But principally, I insist on it being informed. At the same time, I think the conversation needs to be much broader than this. And I've said to my colleagues and my friends, so long as we continue to lay the plight of these urban communities at the feet of the police solely in that conversation, we're going to be having this conversation over and over and over and over again. So I would encourage the mayor and others who are in this public space, who have the opportunity to engage in other meaningful conversations with communities about what can be done collaboratively to address violent crime. It's the police play an important role, but they are a role. There's a lot more driving this. At the same time, we should have honest conversations with ourselves. I agree entirely. We've got 49 people who have died at the hands of gunshots in this city, not a one of them by the police. So it's a bigger problem. It's a broader problem. It's an uncomfortable conversation. It needs to be had if we're going to do something about it, for those who are interested in doing something about it. Congratulations for sure to the new deputy chiefs and to Bishop Tolbert. And to Don, thank you. I know firsthand how much work it is. And there's a lot about this board that's not seen in the public, not heard by the public. There's a lot of engagement, and I certainly had my time in the barrel. Don, you did it admirably, and I know the amount of effort and energy and care and concern that you brought to that. I witnessed it firsthand. I experienced it firsthand. So I want to thank you for what you've done for this board and for this department. And to Mark, welcome to that position. For those of you who don't know Mark, I've said this to Mark's face, and I've said it to everybody who'll listen. Mark Tolbert is one of my favorite people, and I mean that. And he is an incredibly bright, experienced, thoughtful person. So I am excited to see what he brings here and the perspective he brings. I think it will be extremely valuable to this board and to this department. So welcome aboard.
Commissioner Dean.
Congratulations to the new deputy chiefs. Thank you very much for your work as president. Mark, I'm looking forward to you being the president. I've told Mark this many times. During the pandemic, when he had to give the prayer every month, they were some of my favorite that I would hear all month long, and I attend church regularly. So he is my favorite minister, and now he's going to be my favorite president during this time. I want to echo what Meryl said about our communications department. The people who work answering 911 calls and dispatching cars, that is in essence a thankless job. People don't understand how hard it is, how stressful it is. They're looking at 6 different panels, all with different information, and trying to get all of that done quickly and carefully. I was up there, I think I told you already this morning, and listening to them being patient and careful with the people they're talking to. I mean, that's the only way that people in our community, or the main way that people in our community get police officers, is talking to them. So I appreciate them every day, but particularly during the time when we're trying to thank people like them. They're a wonderful group of dedicated people, and we couldn't run the department without them. So I wanted to say how much we appreciate them. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Tolbert?
Thank you. I first want to say thank you to you, Don, for your time of president. Nathan has a crystal ball he won't share with us because he resigned right before everything exploded and started this process. I'm looking forward to working with the chief, looking forward to continue working with the board, Kathy as vice, Nathan crunching those numbers, the mayor doing all that we can do to just try to bring some understanding and help our city move forward. That's why we're here. We're here on purpose, for purpose, and I appreciate the vote of confidence. And I know you won't abandon me when I need you the most. Thank you.
Thank you. And no, we won't abandon you. We'll support you all the way. And really glad you're president now. So, and I know you'll do a great job. So, so we'll support you at, I'd like to congratulate everybody that's promoted. It goes all the way down to the sergeants and so forth. And that's well-deserved, and congratulations. I know it's a difficult time for all police departments, and it's kind of hard to keep a positive attitude when Kansas City Star writes something about you every single day. Appreciate, Rick, what you've been able to do, because I think overall the police department has an incredible attitude, and it's because of your leadership. And so thank you for that, and look forward to going forward with you here. So with that, could we have a motion to go out of open and into closed?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Roll call. Aye.
Oh, roll call vote.
Lucas, aye.
You're right.
Talbert, aye.
Wagner, aye.